What's up? Ghost Fictions is here, and we're back again. This is a story where Issei was banished and becomes the Shadow Monarch. He lived through hell, his achievements were stolen by those he trusted the most, he was destroyed over and over again, but he never gave up. Monster was the name they gave him apart from trash. Bearer of the weakest sacred gear of death, there is only sadness, depression and the scent of death around him, but he still kept a smile, until the day it was broken, and he closed himself off, distrusting everyone, even his own shadow. And he was banished from his own home and the world to which he belonged at that time, but still, Hyoudou Issei did not give up and stayed alive, even when he had no reason to live. He fought and only fought, until he obtained that title that the true god of death can have, that only a true demon is capable of possessing. He became what he swore not to be when he was a being of light. The Monarch of Shadows, King of Death. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations. Also, this is a translate version, you may find some mistakes, specifically in the character's gender. Issei of course is a male, but this time we have a female Vali. Well, with that out, let's get into the story. Issei Hyoudou, the bearer of the Reaper gear, a sacred gear manifested as two short swords or daggers, with a silver edge like most of the weapons, a black blade with bright light blue lines, and with two black orbs, which shine in blue. But the ability to make its bearer stronger at killing, and to grant the magical element of darkness and shadow to its bearer on the day of his birth. Issei was the brother of Ryu Hyoudou, bearer of the boosted gear, and Kani Hyoudou, bearer of the Black Dragon King Vritra. He was overshadowed by them for as long as he could remember, and they only enjoyed it with a sadistic smile, making him suffer a living hell, spreading rumors in the academies to which made him suffer from bullying all the time. Apart from that, he was mistreated at home by his parents and siblings. That boy grew up, shy and unsure of himself, and continued to suffer from the abuse of people, until one day, a girl approached him with the name of Yuma, but she turned out to be a fallen angel who only wanted to kill him, and she succeeded, although he died with a smile of hope, thinking that his suffering would end there, but due to a girl's selfish desire for freedom. He was revived against his will and enslaved. And what everyone would think would be that he was sorry for wishing for death and that he would take advantage of this new opportunity, but it is difficult to wish that when only entering another circle of hell, when you continue being mistreated, when they continue making fun of you and seeing that the one who saved you is disappointed by the power that you possess and only sees you as a useless and worthless burden, unlike your brother, whom they adore as a king. And it all got worse when he fell in love with them and was only rejected, and when he was accepted by someone, they just used him or saw it as a game, and then laughed in his face. Issei still remembers when the one who was supposed to be his girlfriend was unfaithful to him with his brother. Since then he closed himself off with everyone. Even before that, out of desperation and sadness, he began to hunt criminals and stray supernatural beings, to be stronger, but he was only called monster by those he loved the most. And after so many fights, so many plans that he created and that were stolen by his brothers, so many times that he gave his life and almost died, they threw him in the trash, literally, discarding him like a broken tool. After all, his brother already had enough power to protect all of them. After all, who would want the nobody, instead of the one who defeated the Trihiksa? Even his parents did not recognize him as their son and banished him from their home. The brown-haired man with black eyes was walking through a forest, having several wounds on his body, wearing a black short-sleeved shirt, pants somewhat similar to military ones, but black, and black mouths that had his pants inside them, wearing black fingerless gloves with a rectangular hole in the torso of the palm, and a black cape, hood. In his hands he carried short silver swords, with an edge of the same color and a black handle and blade, with black gems with blue sparkles and some neon blue lines on the blades. Those sons of, they sealed most of my powers. Issei thought, annoyed as he ran, and dodged some bone needles from stray devils that followed him. And soon after, one would reach him and throw a blow at him, which he blocked with one of his swords, and then tried to prop up the monster's torso with the other sword, but a stray intercepted him and knocked him to the ground, and then tried to crush him with his arms, but Issei turned to the side and dodged the blow, which destroyed the dirt floor of the forest, raising a curtain of dirt. Issei took advantage of that, and the strays only saw a trail of blue light every time blood was splashed on them, and when the curtain of earth was reduced, it showed Issei, covered in his blood and that of the strays, at his sides, 3 corpses of stray devils, which were disappearing in particles of light. Those who remained were upset and launched themselves against Issei, who did the same and managed to decapitate one of them, then jumped avoiding a sword slash, and hit the face of a humanoid stray, covered in rusty armor. In doing so, he destroyed his helmet and was about to stab him, but a stray similar to an octopus grabbed him and slammed him against the ground, making the brown-haired man spit blood. But before he could do anything, the knight's rusty sword stabbed him in the chest, piercing his torso, heart, and lung, among other things. At that Issei only vomited blood and tried to carefully but quickly withdraw the sword, which he failed to do when the stray aggressively withdrew his sword, tearing Issei's wound even further and causing him to start bleeding and spitting blood to a greater extent. Damn. I saw how they were about to decapitate him. No way I'm going to die here. Issei thought, annoyed, rolling to the side, which surprised the strays when the brown-haired boy dodged the stray knight's sword. After that, Issei got up with difficulty, his eyes shining blue, drawing everyone's attention even more. I don't think about dying now, Issei said seriously, although there was no trace of life in his eyes. Kid, why are you still fighting? Asked the stray in armor, although the others didn't care about that and only wanted to kill Issei and then devour him. I want to live even W when there isn't any M meaning F for that. Issei replied, his eyes shining brightly as did the gem on his swords. After that, a black matter-like mist began to emerge from Issei's wounds, which began to be sealed by the matter, and his left eye began to glow bluish-purple. Well, let's see if you are worthy of it, said the knight before launching himself towards Issei, who only raised his swords which shone, although the one in his left hand shone in a bluish-purple color. The three swords collided with each other, and a flash of light blue and bluish-purple made him present between the two opponents, and when he disappeared, it showed that Issei's swords changed. Its handle grew longer, resembling that of a small spear. The sharp edge of the blade became present on the other side of the end. Apart from that, the blades next to the main blade were healed back, and the pommel was rounded, apart from being symmetrical now, and having lost the handle straps, being completely smooth. The lines became thinner, and the neon stripes and lines on the left-hand short sword, spear were now bluish-purple. Issei in a quick movement cut off the hand that held the sword, making the stray scream in pain. After that he went to his neck, decapitating him instantly. After that he stopped in front of the other strays, although before he saw the corpses without any interest, and then turned to see those who were still alive. Sorry, but this isn't my first rodeo, Issei said without any emotion. From his left eye, a purple flame manifested, which only gave a chill to the stray devils. Time skip. Issei walked through the alleys of the city, badly wounded. A hole-shaped wound on his chest showed through his torso, but he did not die because of a seal on his chest that kept him alive. But he couldn't take it anymore and fell to the ground, hitting his back against one of the parrots in the alley. Issei only spat out blood, and then he saw his chest wound. Fuck man, I got too confident in the end, and that octopus pierced my chest, Issei said annoyed, bringing his hand to the hole in his chest. After that, a magic circle appeared in his hand, and a dark matter came out of it, which went to the hole and began to close the wound, but before it could close completely, it was possible to see how the dark matter formed a heart with purple and light blue lines. After that, Issei just laid him on the alley wall, looking up at the full moon. He just let out a sigh, and closed his eyes for a moment. Me fall in love with you? Ha, I wish. If you thought I loved you, well you're wrong. I just wanted to have a little fun with you, and look. I got it, ha 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 ha. I would never fall in love with a pervert like you. Silly nuisance, you are not our son. Unlike you, Rai and Canny, they are the most perfect children in the world, and we only need them too. Issei, formerly belonging to the Hyoudou, you are banished from the supernatural world. You can still attend the Kuo Academy, but if you talk to anyone related to the supernatural world, you will be instantly eliminated. Hey, stop crying and at least be thankful that we didn't kill the wielder of a weaker death sacred gear, hahaha. They are not worth it, Issei said simply. After that he just got up from the ground and burned himself contemplating the moon a little more, but then he left the place, as if he had never been there, leaving behind him a pool of blood. After a few minutes, a magic circle appeared in the alley where two girls came out, one blonde-haired with blue eyes, wearing a beautiful magician's dress. And the other girl was a silver-haired girl with blue eyes, wearing a blue jacket with black fur and pink edges. The inside of the jacket was red, with a short dress with a zipper, a metal necklace, and boots that reached up to her calves. Damn, we're late, Lavinia, said the silver-haired girl annoyed. I know, Valerie. She lets out a sigh. We have to track him down and quickly. If what we saw in the forest was his doing, then he must be very badly hurt, Lavinia said worriedly. Look. Swallow a little saliva. There is blood here, it is surely his, said Valerie friend uncomfortably. Lavinia turned to see where Valerie was looking, and was surprised to see a huge amount of blood on the wall and a trail on the floor, which greatly alarmed her. Quick, we have to take it and make an amulet that tracks it, before its condition gets worse, Lavinia said worried and scared. Valerie was also worried, but before doing anything, Lavinia took out some things, with which she collected Issei's blood. With Issei. This same person was walking through the darkest shadows of the night, wearing a cloak, hood that covered his entire body down to his calves, and did not allow his face to be seen with the exception of his mouth, although it was covered by a face mask. He just moved from one place to another, but whenever he had the chance, he would kill some criminal or stray, thus healing his wounds with their life forces. He stayed like that for a while, until he came to an abandoned building where he entered and leaned against a wall. After that he settled down to be more comfortable in his place. Damn, what am I going to do now? He asked himself while looking at the ceiling. There's nothing you can do, Issei-kun, said a girl's voice in his head. He just closed his eyes. Issei's mental space. Issei appeared in a desert and dead landscape, all black or dark gray. Issei just began to walk, seeing that throughout the place, cracks were present in the landscape and a pinkish purple light peeked through them. How long, Issei-kun? Said a black-haired girl with amethyst eyes, with a smile, while she was sitting on a small throne. What do you want, Rainer? I'm not in the mood for your masochistic nonsense, Issei asked, annoyed. Can't I talk to my dear boyfriend? Rainer asked, pretending to be hurt, but one of Reaper Gear's spears passed by her, making a cut on her cheek and cutting off a wing and making her scream in pain. Issei only had his left hand raised, showing that he was the one who threw the weapon. He just began to approach and stomped on Rainer, throwing her to the ground and causing her to scream in pain again, but shadows covered her mouth. His eyes shine in light blue and purple. Listen to me, you cheap fool, they bother me again, and I will devour your soul, said Issei. Rainer for the first time saw him with terror. The purple color of his left eye only terrified her more. Issei after a while left her and decided to return to reality. Time skip. It was already daytime. Issei was in front of a window of an abandoned building, looking outside, but behind him were the corpses of some criminals and stray devils. The latter were disappearing into particles of light, which then headed towards Issei's body, absorbing it, just like an aura that came out of the criminals and was absorbed by Issei. He let out a sigh of annoyance, feeling his wounds heal. Since I remember, I replaced my heart with an artificial one, made of dark magic and the shadow element. Lets out a sigh. I hope nothing bad happens, Issei thought, and then walked away from the window without being noticed by anyone in all that time. Somewhere else. 3 people were flying and descending, landing in the snow on a mountain. Michael, why did you bring us here? Azazel asked, annoyed by the cold. Even with a coat, he didn't take it off. The aforementioned let out a sigh. Do you remember what our father did when he forgave humanity thanks to Jesus Christ? Michael asked. Serzicha saw him with condition and Azazel with surprise. If I remember, humanity was purified after that, although they sinned again after that, Azazel said. Michael let out a sigh. Don't you remember what he told us? Michael asked, annoying Azazel. Michael, enough with the beating around the bush and tell me why we're a. I didn't finish speaking when a wave of the aura of death was spat out by a curve near them. What was that? Serzicha asked, surprised and alarmed. Don't fuck with me, but how? Azazel asked in shock. Father tried to use it in the battle against the Trahixa, but unfortunately in the battle, Lucifer took it from him and used that power. Some time after they both died, that was lost. Michael responded. Inside the cave a purple light appeared. But what did you lose? Serzicha asked, confused. Inside the cave everything is consumed by shadows, even the light did not illuminate anything. Going deeper, into a stone, embedded. The heart of darkness itself, all the power of sin channeled into a single point, increased with each death that was carried out in this world, a power that equaled the original Grim Reaper, demonic and also celestial. The Reaper crystal was created by my father, since with each human or supernatural death, the energy of life itself was released, so this gem absorbed it. So that no one could use it, but as I said, it was lost in the Holy War, where you remember, angels, devils, fallen, dragons, Asgardians, yokai and more supernatural beings died. Michael said seriously. The purple gem was embedded in the stone, releasing a purple glow and releasing a dark matter and shadow, which covered his entire chamber, being wrapped in a small rope. So, this is the most powerful object in the world? Serzicha asked, surprised. Yes, since even now, it continues to absorb the remaining life energy from the corpses of the people who die now. Michael said seriously. But I can't feel anything in there, just the aura of death, which is barely noticeable, Azazel said, confused, getting a little closer to the cave, but Michael held him at the last moment. It doesn't emit any presence or power, since our father wanted to hide it, but anyway, don't come closer or it will kill you, the angel said seriously. Do you think Ryu can get it? Asked the devil seriously. I don't know, maybe with the dragon Diabolos I'll be able to access the place, Michael said thoughtfully. Reaper crystal. Does it have any relation to the Reaper gear? Azazel thought somewhat thoughtfully and seriously. But the 3 of them were thrown to the ground when a wave of death aura came out of the cave, making the entrance bigger and causing you to scream and some holes to form in the ground. Somewhere else. Issei was walking down an alley but fell to his knees and held his head. Find me, get me, be one again. said a voice in Issei's mind. It grew louder and louder, making him have a bigger and bigger headache. Come to me. Come back. You need me. We need you, said the voice, scaring Issei. Shut up. Raynor shouted in Issei's mind. Visions passed through Issei's mind, the death of an insect, then a small animal, then a medium and large one, then to that of a human, and that their number would increase. Then there were natural beings until reaching the largest, dragons and some gods, battlefields full of blood and corpses, murders for fair and unfair trials, the death of sinners and saints, and everything ended in a mountain. In the mountain where the Reaper crystal was. Issei. It's time to ascend, said the voice in Issei's head. His left eye lit up in purple flames, and he fell to the ground holding where his new heart was. Back with the 3 leaders. Azazel created a magic circle in his ear. Bring everything to create an average-sized base for now. We need reinforcements and a lot of research material, said Azazel, hearing a hi from the other end of the call. After that he cut the call. Okay, let's wait for the others, Surziches said, getting up from the ground. We better get away from here, Michael said, spreading his wings, as did Surziches and Azazel. We have to find Issei, Azazel said, surprising the two. And why look for the useless F, Surziches said, confused. I feel like his sacred gear has something to do with the Reaper crystal, F, Azazel said seriously. Surziches let out a sigh of annoyance and created a magic circle. Hello Graphia, I need you to send someone for the Reaper gear carrier. Yes. It's something important, no need. You'll send Igris, okay, but send him with a squad of summoning mages. Issei is not good against multiple opponents, Surziches said calmly. He spoke a little more and then hung up the call. Well, problem solved, Michael said. It seems so, Azazel said more calmly. Time skip. Issei ran across a roof, then entered an abandoned building, where he heard a scream. He then went down the stairs, and was surprised by what he found on the floor below. A large and absurd amount of large red wolves, with a lower jaw made of metal, something that literally could not be natural, and even more so when they were all the same. Damn, this is going to be pain in the ass, said Issei, and then materialized the 2 Reaper gear weapons. Issei launched himself, cutting 5 wolves in half, then kicking one in the face, deflecting its head, and then decapitating it. After that he launched one of his weapons, piercing another wolf that was followed by 4 more, then returned to Issei's right hand, which spun on its axis and cut some more wolves, then cut and threw himself to the ground, sliding on it and cutting the legs of some wolves, which fell to the ground, howling in pain. After that Issei got up, spun the weapon in his left hand, then hit the ground, causing thorns of darkness to come out of the ground, and pierced about 6 wolves, which fell to the ground with their legs cut off, killing them instantly. After that Issei moved, avoiding a bite from one, and decapitating it instantly. After that he jumped, dodging one that passed under him. Then spun in the air and kicked one, causing it to crash into the ground. Issei fell on top of it, stabbing its heart. After that he jumped again, preventing 3 wolves from killing him, and jumped forward, cutting all 3 instantly. What's wrong? Is that all you have? Issei asked with a confident smile. After that the ground began to crack, and after that it broke, causing Issei and a few remaining wolves to fall. Issei quickly recovered and jumped up, realizing that he fell into a kind of nest. Darkness enveloped everything around him, and red eyes were present in the shadows, going from 1, 2, 4, 7, 9, 20, 59, 100, 349, 49, 39, up to thousands, or rather hundreds of thousands. Come at me you flea-ridden fuckers, and I'll show you true hell, Issei said with a smile, his left eye lighting up in a purple flame, while his sclera turned from white to black. Time skip. Issei was on top of a mountain of wolf corpses, tired and sweaty, but the life energy of the dead wolves was released from their corpses and absorbed by Issei, who completely regenerated and his fatigue disappeared. He just laughed and jumped off the mountain, landing on his feet to the ground. After that he shook off the dust and headed for the exit of the place, jumping and climbing the wall and returning to the floor above. What strange animals, although it is very noticeable that they are artificial, Issei thought calmly. It matters, you didn't die, so this has already lost interest, Raynor said, bored in Issei's mind, causing him to let out a sigh and start walking. I better get changed, I can't keep going like this, Issei said, referring to his clothes, dirty and torn. He would see how to get clothes. Time skip. That worked, Issei said at the top of a building, now dressed in other clothes. Hey, what's wrong with your hair? It's getting darker, Raynor asked, bored, annoyed at Issei. What do you care about that? Issei said, annoyed, bothering the fallen girl, who was about to speak, but Issei cut off communication with her. But when he was about to leave, metallic footsteps sounded in the place. Issei turned around angrily, seeing a crimson knight. From the visor 2 shark shapes could be seen, which were his eyes. Blood red, Commander Igris, Issei said seriously. Issei, formerly Issei Hyoudou, has been called before the great devil king Surziches Lucifer. He will come with me by good or by bad means, said the knight Igris. Issei only let out a sigh. I'm not going to go, anyway, why do they want my presence, I'm just a good-for-nothing useless guy. Issei said with an arrogant smile, but Igris appeared in front of him, hitting him in the stomach, causing him to spit out blood. After that, Igris grabbed Issei by the head and threw him into the street, making a crater with the impact of the brown hair on the ground. Issei got up with difficulty, blood coming out of his mouth. Shit, I made him angry. Issei thought, annoyed. Really? I didn't know. Rainer said in Issei's head mockingly, annoying the brown-haired boy. But Issei didn't give it much importance and rolled to the side, avoiding the Red Knight's fist, which destroyed the asphalt, but the shockwave sent Issei crashing into a wall. But the brown-haired boy materialized his sacred gear and launched himself at Igris, who remained still and only received Issei's attack. Issei's swords, spears only collided with the armor, deviating and giving off sparks. Gosh, I forgot that her armor is the same as Nyx's clothes, only instead of virgins, weapons. Issei thought, annoyed, to dodge a blow from the knight, but like a machine gun, he launched several blows at Issei, which threw him to the other side of the street. But Issei jumped up, cracked his neck and began to slowly walk towards Igris, who raised an eyebrow in confusion. Well, it's time to take this seriously. Issei said, his eyes flashed blue and purple, and he disappeared in a burst of speed. Igris was slightly surprised, and more so when Issei appeared in front of him and hit him in the stomach, lifting the knight slightly and causing a dent to form in Igris's armor, who tried to hit back, but Issei dodged it, and when he threw another blow, Igris dodged it, and so they began a battle to see which of the two did more damage, dodging and throwing blows, but Igris showed his superiority. When he managed to connect more than 5 blows on Issei, and then hold him and hit him against the ground. Issei moved and told a kick to Igris, who blocked it with his forearm, and then hit him in the chest, but Issei disappeared in a blur of speed and appeared crouched in front of Igris to connect a blow to the knight's chest, who spat out blood and got upset, and mercilessly, he hit Issei back in the face, knocking him to the ground, but Issei rolled to the side, avoiding a stomp from Igris. Issei quickly got up from the ground, but a bluish aura appeared around him, and he was drawn towards Igris, who connected several blows to Issei and grabbed him by the neck. Unfortunately, I have to take you alive before my king, so don't do anything stupid, said Igris, annoyed. The king who does not value his own and cares more about the image of himself and his clan than you. Issei said with an arrogant smile. Igris only hit him in the stomach, causing him to spit blood. Shut up, said Igris, annoyed. Say what you want, but you know I'm telling the truth. After all, what he did to Akita Saoji, instead of helping her and freeing her from her suffering before the overload of Yakai power, he sealed her in endless suffering, said Issei, seeing that Igris remained still, which Issei takes advantage of and materializes one of the Reaper gear weapons and stabs her in one of his eyes. Igris let go of Issei in pain and quickly withdrew the weapon and looked at Issei with hatred. Sorry, it slipped out, Issei said, and then launched himself towards Igris and made him crash into a wall. After that he began to connect a shower of blows, denting Igris's armor, but he released more power and held Issei by the face and then threw him against a car. Igris quickly moved towards Issei and was about to stab him with his own weapon, but it disappeared into particles of purple light, and Issei only received a punch to the chest, causing him to bleed. Igris still did not stop, and in his left hand a black sword with a golden edge materialized. He was about to cut Issei, but the brown-haired man released a wave of power, which made the knight step back a little, but when he recovered, he wasted no time and launched himself against Issei, being about to decapitate him, but at the last moment Issei held the sword with his right hand, and showing that his two eyes had black sclera and shone light blue and purple, although in his left eye, some purple veins were evident, and in a short time and at great speed, Issei materialized his sacred gear in his left hand, and then stabbed the knight in the mentor under the head, where he did not have strong armor, and ended up piercing his head, killing him instantly. The corpse fell on top of Issei, who pushed him aside, and the brunette moved a little, falling to his knees. Igris's vital energy left his body and moved towards Issei, who absorbed it. Who looks at his hand, and it is enveloped by a bluish aura. Heh, I see now I have your… What did you call it? Well, it doesn't matter, now I have your telekinesis, said Issei, while some objects in front of him were enveloped in a bluish aura and moved along with Issei's hand. But other metallic footsteps caught Issei's attention, who looked up and saw some demonic knights and some magicians. Because of their robes that covered their entire body, apart from some things they had, they looked like summoners. He spits out some blood. It will be better to kill them now, the brown-haired boy whispered, moving at great speed, but reduced by exhaustion, and what he absorbed from Igris was not enough. Issei began to kill them quickly with his own fists or kicks, crushing their bodies or heads with now his telekinesis, killing him shortly after. After that Issei went for the summoners, but in front of them, enchanted armor appeared, bothering Issei, but he got rid of them easily, but more and more appeared, and he just got tired. Ugh, damn, where are they? Issei asked, realizing that the magicians had disappeared. Issei quickly moved between the armor, destroying them. But Issei came up with something, and that was to hide. He just moved to the shadows and wrapped himself in shadow element magic and under his presence, thus disappearing. And after a short time, the magicians appeared again through a concealment spell, which they deactivated to see what Issei disappeared. After that they began to use a fact, all-seeing eye. They began to say a chant, but Issei ate quickly, decapitating one and then another, hitting a third, but about two that remained were placed in the center of the street and began to create a spell through it. Magic circle. Issei wouldn't allow it, but unfortunately it had already been finished when all the armor gathered into a large metal ball in the air and formed a gigantic golem, which launched a blow towards the brown-haired man. But he dodges it and begins to climb the golem's arm, climbing onto its head, and seeing the magicians who were scared to see it, Issei only materialized his weapons completely and began to attack, cutting them all in place. After that the golem began to fall to pieces. Issei only jumped to the nearest roof and saw how the golem fell. "What a disaster," said Issei, seeing the destruction. The vital energies of his enemies began to be absorbed by his body. After that Issei got down and saw Igris, although his sword interested him more, so he began to approach him, but he heard something. "I lost," said a whisper, sounding like Igris's voice. Issei, interested, approached and saw how vital energy was still coming out of Igris. "It seems like he's still clinging to life," Issei thought in amazement. "Sorry, Surzich's Sama failed. Akita, I'm sorry, but our final battle will no longer take place. Sorry father, I could not fulfill my duty to serve my king until the last. I'm sorry." Igris's voice said in whispers. Issei let out a sigh of annoyance. "You're pathetic," Issei began saying, silencing the whispers of Igris's voice. "You follow an idiot who will abandon you, who will sacrifice you in exchange for him continuing to live. You don't understand. You defend a rotten throne, which will fall in some assigned time. He only sees you as a tool and nothing more." He let out a sigh. "Whatever, let's get this over with," Issei said angrily, sending magical energy in the form of shadows, which enveloped Igris, and began to try to draw out what was left of his vital energy. But no matter how hard he tried, nothing came out, and even increasing the energy absorption, Issei only got more upset. "Damn, stupid vitality, get out of that junk, emerge at once from that body with no current value, surge," Issei shouted, annoyed and tired, but an explosion of shadows appeared around Igris, surprising Issei. The blue light appeared and a figure stood in front of Issei. Before an incredulous Issei, an Igris made of black shadows with some blue parts stood up. He walked a little, which made Issei materialize his weapons again, but Igris did not flinch and only materialized his sword. He raised it, learning the blade in his two hands, and kneels before Issei, handing his sword to the brown-haired boy, who opened his eyes in surprise. "What are you doing?" Issei asked, uncomfortable and moving away from Igris, who was just looking at him. Issei stared at him, his mind was racing 1,000 miles an hour. He didn't understand what happened until an idea crossed his mind. He just approached where the corpses of knights and magicians were and wrapped them in shadows, then concentrated a little more magic. "Get up." "Nothing happens." "Get up." "Nothing happens again." "Get up from the dead." But nobody came. Issei let out a sigh and closed his eyes. "Arise," said Issei, opening his eyes, which shine in blue and purple. The corpses were enveloped in shadows and a blue light, which swirled around the corpses, and once again, some figures rose again. The knights and wizards rose back to life before their new lord, possessing new bodies composed of shadows and blue energy. The knights knelt while the wizards bowed before Issei, but Igris moved quickly and made everyone be on their knees and with their faces on the ground. After that Igris placed himself in front of Issei and knelt on one knee and crouched. "Dude, you didn't have to do that," Issei said uncomfortably. "Although, now that I think about it, I'll have to give you names, since I'm not going to refer to you as you are knights or magicians." "Look at Igris. Blood Red Commander. You know your name is ridiculous, let's just leave it at Igris, how about it?" Issei asked. Igris nodded, and "Well, you guys. I'll think about it later," Issei said without interest. The shadows nodded. "By the way, where do I put you?" Issei asked. The shadows only became a kind of mist and entered Issei's shadow, surprising him, except for Igris, who stayed in front of Issei. "Well, you come in too, I'll call them when I need them or have something in mind," Issei said. Igris understood and entered the shadow of his new king. "Time skip. Man, since I think about it, I need a place to live," Issei said lazily, entering an abandoned building, now being on the other side of the city. But Issei felt a tug behind him, so he turned around and saw blue eyes peeking out from his own shadow. "Arise," said Issei. One of the magician's shadows came out and knelt before Issei. "Hey friend, don't do that for now, just say what you want," said Issei, annoyed. It's only been half an hour since he has them, and they are already a headache. Elmeo just stood still in place, and Issei realized something. "You can't talk, in fact." Looks at his shadow. "Since I notice none of you speak." He lets out a sigh and looks back at the shadow in front of him. Whatever, we see, I'm not doing this, but since you're under my domain, do what you want to do, but you already know the consequences if something bad happens. Issei said, his eyes shining. In light blue and purple, scaring the magician, who turned to the room and created several light blue magic spells. After that, a glow illuminated the room, and when it faded, we found the room spotless and with some furniture. Although they didn't seem like much, the magician just trembled and sweated from fear. Issei smiled, ignoring the magician's state. "Good job, I was surprised." Issei began saying. The magician calmed down and felt proud of himself. "Arise." The other magician shadows came out of his shadow and stood in front of him, looking with envy at the magician who fixed the room. "Well, as my first order, I want you to create a magic field around the building that hides our presence and shows an illusion of the destroyed and ruined building. After that, start fixing it," Issei said with a small smile. The shadows nodded and went to fulfill Issei's mission. "Igris," Issei called, and the shadow stood on his right side. "I want you to go and secure the area. Igris will take care of everything," Issei said. The Shadow Knight nodded, and the night shadows emerged from Issei's shadow and followed their sub-leader through the darkness. After they left, Issei sat on the sofa that the magician brought. After that, he stared into space thinking about some things. After a while, he let out a sigh. "Damn, now I'm wanted for that fools." He holds his head in pain when visions of a mountain and what happened with Surziches, Michael and Azazel came to his head. "Fuck, whatever you are, you're fucking annoying," Issei said, annoyed and serious. "Lavinia, how much longer?" Valerie asked, leaning on the doorframe and crossing his arms. The blonde had a necklace in her hands. "Calm down, I don't have much time left to finish the necklace that will take us to Issei-kun," said Lavinia with some seriousness. "Well, unfortunately you'll have to leave it for now, Azazel is calling us," Valerie said. Lavinia let out a sigh of frustration. "Okay," Lavinia said, then put down the necklace. The gem she had, which was a dull blue color, shone purple without her and Valerie noticing. Time skip. Every second that passes. "I feel like I'm falling deeper into darkness," Issei said while lying on the couch. Some shadows carrying things and arranging others watched him for a second and then continued with their own thing, everyone except Igris, who stayed by his side. "Hey Igris," Issei called. The knight turned to look at him. "What do you think we should do?" Issei asked, bored, looking with his onyx eyes at the knight, who went to a table and took a paper and pencil. After a few seconds, he returned to Issei and handed him the paper. Issei sat down and read what the shadow wrote. "My lord, I am not the one to decide what to do, but I suggest going out and hunting more strays or some other living being that will provide more power for you." Issei blinked a few times. He saw Igris and then some of his abras and let out a sigh. "Okay, you have a good idea. Apart from that, I want to surpass those three main fools, and for that I have to be stronger, at least since some of the abilities of my sacred gear. 1. Absorbs the vitality of those I kill. 2. They give me control of darkness and shadows. 3. I can steal the special or outstanding abilities of those I kill, although I don't know if only that. And 4. It turns me into a necromancer." He lets out a sigh. "And since I think about it, I needed allies other than you and resources," Issei said, and then let out a heavy sigh. Although Igris was surprised by Issei's lung capacity, practically before the sigh, he said everything directly. "Okay, let's do this." He stands up, and before him, all the shadows that were outside of his stood in front of him. 4 magicians and 6 knights stay. Igris and others, come with me. I want you in my shadow, or here, to train each other. I don't want that in the future. All of you cannot against a simple low class. Issei said. Everyone nodded. You already knew more or less the rank of each one. They were all upper middle class and Igris of upper elite class. In more detailed ranks, Issei has a SIB rank in his ranks, but he wants them to reach higher ranks like S, or if possible in the future, to an X rank, a rank that exceeds the supreme or ultra class. Issei let out a small malicious laugh at that idea. His shadows felt determined for some reason, and suddenly, they wanted to meet all of their lord's expectations, no matter what and at all costs. "Well, it would be better to get out at once, before I get lazy," Issei said, approaching a window and jumping, while he was followed by his shadows, and they entered the shade of Issei, although once down he realized that it was raining. "Then bring me an umbrella," said Issei, annoyed. The good thing is that he didn't get wet, since Igris was covering him with his cloak. Time skip. Through the streets of the city, a dark-haired girl, with pale skin and green eyes, with an umbrella, a black and green dress, a scarf and long stockings, both with black and green stripes, wearing a white coat and white boots. The dark-haired girl in the distance saw a mansion, which was none other than the Hyoudou mansion. The girl looked at it with sadness, still remembering her best friend. "Issei-kun, what happened to you?" said the girl. A tear rolled down her right cheek. It had been almost a week since Issei's disappearance, although no one cared about that, with the exception of a few people, including the girl who saw the Hyoudou mansion in the distance, who let out a sigh and decided to leave the place. She walked for a while until she reached an apartment building, where she went up the stairs and walked down the hallway to her room, although some men looked at her with great interest, but the girl ignored them all. Somewhere else. On top of a building, holding an umbrella, he was watching the girl from a distance without her realizing it. Although her expression was monotonous, inside she was in conflict. The gloomy knight looked at his lord with condition. You know, Igris, my life was shit, although I know others had it worse. Issei began saying, answering Igris's silent question. I was deceived and used a few times. I went from being a being of light to almost one of darkness. Even that, I know I haven't fallen into the darkness completely, but unfortunately. That girl. Her name is Elizabeth von Einsborn. He lets out a sigh. I think that she is my supposed only friend, although after so many things I did, and that I behaved with her like a total idiot after an event. He lets out another sigh. I don't know what to do with that subject. Issei said dejectedly. Igris understood and took out a pencil and a notebook, where he wrote something and gave it to Issei, who read its contents. My lord, I don't know how to answer your sentimental and emotional question, but I think you should have some time away from her. If what she tells you is true, then you did something that hurt her, and it is better to wait for the wound, not only hers, but also yours, to heal in due time. Issei let out a sigh at what he read and returned the notebook to Igris. You're right, it'll be better to leave this for a while, but, arise. A knight and a magician came out of Issei's shadow. I want you to stay with her, don't let her find out about you, take care of her at all costs, let her know if something happens. Issei said. His two shadow soldiers nodded and headed to Elizabeth's apartment. But who are they? Elizabeth asked herself when she saw two figures. Although one of them was giving off a light blue light, it didn't help much to identify them. Until a lightning bolt struck, and that was when Elizabeth managed to see who they were and managed to recognize the person she was looking for. Issei was there, looking directly at her apartment building, next to a shadow being similar to a knight with something red coming out of his head. But when the lightning disappeared, the two of them were gone, and Elizabeth was upset by that. Days after, Issei was calm in his now new home, but the shadow of a magician appeared entering through the window. Issei only saw it for a few seconds. Come to think of it, everyone here came in through the window instead of the door. Issei said thoughtfully. The shadow became embarrassed and looked away. But whatever, what's going on? Issei asked curiously. The shadow remembered what was there and created a magic circle, which projected a hologram. In the hologram you could see how Arias and Sona received some Asgardians, apart from Surzich's warning them of the current situation, to look for Issei and Igris and his squad, since they went to look for Issei, but disappeared. At that Issei laughed, and that he sent the Asgardians as reinforcements. Kidder, the Asgardians, who were warriors, brought some animals. The most outstanding being ridiculously giant polar bears, although one was bigger, and it was noticeable that it was the leader. Issei smiled maliciously. His eyes shone, although the left one shone more intensely. Well, I already know who will join my ranks. Said Issei to get up and then get ready. That same night, Issei stood on top of a building, wearing clothes that hid his identity. In the streets, the Asgardians and some devils and fallen were putting together a magic circle, which over time, deployed a dome around the city, and divided and created a dimension apart from the original, like the mirrored dimension of Doctor Strange for the compass. This would allow them to see the city without attracting attention. And all the supernatural beings were put there, since even if it didn't seem like it and Issei was banished from the Rias clan and the supernatural world, he was still a reincarnated devil, of low class, but with the power of a high class. Issei jumped from the top of the building. Mana in the form of black mist was released from his body, reinforcing it at the same time. Issei just made a superhero landing which surprised everyone and raised a smokescreen. From it you could see 2 points of light, one blue and one purple, and when the smoke cleared, it showed Issei. Who are you? Asked the one who seemed to be the leader of the group. I am Death, said Issei in a serious and cold manner, releasing the aura of death. You don't even know what you said the sub-leader. Okay, you're right, I don't have the slightest idea of what I said, but whatever, I'm just Death and you're the future dead. Issei said as he launched himself against them. His hands were wrapped in shadows that allowed them to use their hands as blades. The leader blocked Issei with his shield and hit him in the face, throwing the assassin back. Okay, you're strong. He stands up and snaps his neck, then disappears in a burst of speed and hits the guy in the stomach, causing him to spit out blood. But I'm stronger, Issei said with a smile, then jumps up and kicks him, sending the leader crashing through a wall. But Issei didn't have time to dodge a fireball that ended up crashing him into a building. The leader returned to his group. He looked upset. Where is it? He asked, annoyed. I'm done with him, said the magician who attacked him with superiority, but Issei appeared next to him. I'm sorry, but your magic is useless, Issei said, and then decapitated the subject by cutting his neck with his hand wrapped in shadow element mana. After that he went against the others, but a paw got in his way. Issei stopped and noticed that a large group of bears stood in front of him, and the largest, a polar bear with several scars, grayish fur on its back and red eyes, with what looked like an alpha mark, combined with a slavery mark on its chest. "Heh, buddy, it seems you and I had the same fate," Issei said with a disappointed smile, looking at the mark of the bear that attacked him. But one of the friends, through the mark, forced the bear to attack the brown-haired, almost black-haired. Issei only let out a sigh, more to see that the magicians also attacked him. "Arise," said Issei. From his shadow, his battalion of knights and magicians appeared, the latter staying behind as support. After that Issei launched himself again, decapitating 2 bears, while his soldiers take care of the others or the Asgardians. Issei dodges the attacks of the alpha bear, until he is kicked in the jaw, raising his head, and when the brown-haired boy was about to make another attack, the leader went against him with shield and hammer, causing him to crash into a wall, going through it. "Damn," said Issei, annoyed. "Do you really think you can fight us?" said the leader, annoyed. Issei looked over his shoulder and saw that his shadows could fight the others, but the alpha bear was destroying them. Although he could regenerate them, that consumed a lot of mana and he didn't plan to spend it. "Come back," said Issei, and then paid the leader, taking him towards his group. After that Issei left the building and walked towards the devil and fallen Asgardians. "Arise," Issei said. Igris appeared behind him, while his king's eyes shone brightly in their respective colors. "Attack the bear, I'll take care of the others," Issei said, and then materialized the Reaper gear in all its splendor, which surprised everyone. "Surprise," said Issei, took off his hood, cap and mouth cover. But before any of them could say anything, Issei and Igris went on the attack. Igris attacked the bear by stabbing his sword into the scar on its chest, then making a large cut and running upwards, going for its head, then decapitating it in a clean and easy way, and while in the air, Igris caught the bear's head and put it in a safe place. Meanwhile Issei quickly killed each devil or fallen, the most difficult being the Asgardians, although they could not keep up with the Grim Reaper and ended up bleeding or decapitated, but the leader went into action again, jumping towards Issei, who dodged his hammer and cut off his arm, stopping and then kicking him. "Kill him," said Issei to dodge some lightning and a flame and decapitate those who attacked him. Igris, being at the top, jumped with all his strength and landed on top of the leader, sticking his sword into him and piercing his torso. After that he took it out of the now corpse, and with a movement of his sword, he got rid of the blood on it. He was going to help Issei, but he saw how he finished off his enemies faster and faster, so he decided not to intervene unless it was necessary. Time skip. They were all already dead. Some knights were carrying the corpses to a clearer area. While Issei approached them, Igris approached Issei and dropped the heads of those in his hand, which surprised the brown-haired boy, and more to see how Igris knelt before him. "Literally reminds me of a cat." He lets out a sigh. "What are you doing?" Igris asked. He looked him in the eyes, and Issei understood the message. "You don't need to make offerings to me, your presence is enough," Issei said calmly. Igris nodded. After that Issei turned to the corpses and enveloped them in his shadow magic. "Arise," Issei said. After that burst of dark power, shadows and a slight blue light were present in the place. The silhouettes of the fallen devils and Asgardians rose, but 2 of them stood out, the shadow of the leader and the alpha bear. "Let's see, you," point to the ex-leader. "Have no fucking idea of all your abilities or personality, but still, I'll call you Iron. Meanwhile, the others wait for me to think of their names, so go in," said Issei, pointing to his shadow. The shadows nodded and turned into mist and entered Issei's shadow. Igris approached him and saw the remaining parts or objects of his king's enemies, so he called his attention and pointed at all of that. "Yes, we should get rid of those things," Issei said with interest. Days after. "Wow, now my hair is completely black. Apart from that, I look more handsome," Issei said with a smile, looking at himself in a mirror. After seeing each other for a while longer, the now black-haired man got ready and decided to go to a room where there was a group of his shadows, being the Asgardian shadows of wizards and the wizards of devils. "Would the amulet be there already?" Issei asked. The shadows nodded and handed Issei a necklace with a purple gem. "Well, now I can go for her," Issei said. Although he noticed the curiosity of his shadows, he saw them and let out a sigh. "We will go for a new servant, but we will not kill her. I want her alive, since being dead, I do not know if her abilities will remain the same," he responded. His shadows nodded after having understood. After that, Issei headed to another area of his building, preparing to leave. Once everything was done, Issei was in front of a teleportation magic circle. Their shadows entered his own, and then he stood on top of the magic circle, then teleported somewhere else. "Damn, what's going on?" Serziches said, annoyed. He was in a meeting with Michael, Azazel and Auden. His soldiers were supposed to have come with Issei several days ago, but they never arrived. "Have you found anything in the last places you were?" Michael asked seriously. "No, it's like the earth swallowed them up," Auden said, annoyed. And all this mess to find a good for nothing. Surzicha said annoyed and massaging his temple. Something doesn't fit, Issei is not supposed to be allied with anyone, why would anyone defend him? Unless there is someone who attacks them and makes them disappear. No. He can't perhaps. Azazel thought surprised. But Issei. He was entering some ruins, he was just walking through a destroyed temple, made up of thousands of people as support and with very few walls. Issei didn't pay much attention to that and just walked, following the divine aura signatures, but the more he walked, they saw some statues of people. But every time he gets closer to the source of divine energy, the statues begin to break. As time passed, the statues would be destroyed, split in half or with parts remaining, such as the head, legs or arms, until he reached a corridor at the entrance of a cave, where there was a transparent barrier like water. Divine energy came out of there, and Issei decided to cross it. When he tried, he felt an unimaginable thirst for blood. So this is where I leave Athena. Without a doubt she did not deserve it, but past is past, and I can't do anything about it. Issei said calmly. He was already used to killer instincts, and more, since nothing compares to that of Shiva, great Radha. Issei walked through the tunnel. At the end he could see a light and hear the sound of birds. Once he reached the end, he found a temple in better condition than the previous one. The birds ivan from one side to the other, singing their melodies. But again, the statues of people were in the place, some with broken parts, but not destroyed. Issei walked a while longer. Until he reached the middle of the temple and found the one he was looking for. A beautiful woman, with purple hair, eyes of the same color and revealing black and purple clothes. 2 daggers were stuck in the ground, and chains were coming out of them, which wrapped around the woman, preventing her from moving. Issei walked towards her, getting her attention. The woman turned to look at him seriously, and her eyes shined. But Issei didn't even flinch. He felt the necklace he was wearing activate before the woman's eyes shined, avoiding whatever would have happened to her if she hadn't been wearing it. "Demon. What are you doing here?" the woman asked calmly, although inside she was surprised to see that her gaze did not work with this person. Issei didn't give it much importance and just walked until he was in front of her, crouching down to her height. He looked the woman in the eyes, making her upset, although she was a little embarrassed. "Well, I'm only here for you. Medusa, or better known as Medusa the Gorgon," Issei said calmly. The woman did not flinch. After all, she was known by the entire supernatural world, and if someone did not know who she was, well, they were completely stupid and arrogant, or they were a simple upper class with no value whatsoever. "What do you want?" asked Medusa, looking at Issei with distrust. "I love you." The woman saw him in a bad way. "Well, I want to free you and for you to join me," Issei said calmly and with a smile. Medusa just stared at him. Without a doubt this person was not to be trusted, especially when the aura of death, darkness and a gloomy aura were released from his body, which did not give her a good feeling, although in all that darkness and negative things, everything felt peaceful, or was it sleeping? "Why do you want that?" he asked seriously. Issei let out a sigh and sat in front of the woman. "I was betrayed by the factions, I was banished and even wrongfully accused, I lied and killed, I admit it, but I appreciate the sin, but I want to live without problems, and for that I need to be strong and eliminate all threats, and apart from that, I need powerful allies, and I want you to be the first of several people who will join me," Issei said calmly. "How do you know your plan will work?" Medusa asked, unconvinced. "I don't know, but I can promise you more power, for example the chance to kill the 2 who made your life a hell, the 2 who made your eyes turn to stone every time you look at someone, kill those 2 murderers who killed your loved one," Issei said calmly, although behind Medusa he saw a statue of a young man, in perfect condition. From the body of Medusa, purple electrical rays began to be created, and she looked at the boy with hatred for remembering that event. "What? Do you hate the truth so much?" Issei asked simply. Medusa stopped to see what he was doing. "Damn," the woman whispered, but Issei heard her. "Look, I didn't come to accept a no, so what's your decision?" Issei said calmly. "Why are you asking my decision?" Annoyed Jellyfish asked. "To know if I need to use these." Issei said. On the torso of his hand, some symbols became present, and on Medusa's neckline, some symbols identical to Issei's began to be drawn, in a bluish-purple color. "Son of a," Medusa said with hatred, realizing that it was a seal of master and servant, which makes her a kind of slave for the black-haired man. Issei only placed his index finger on Medusa's lips, silencing her. Hey, calm down, don't insult my mother when you have her in front of you, besides relax, it's not like I'm going to take advantage of you like that," Issei said with an amused smile. "Issei? Where is Issei?" Valerie asked desperately. A few minutes ago Lavinia had arrived where she was, telling her that she had already finished the amulet necklace to find the now black-haired man. "Calm down or someone will hear you," Lavinia said, somewhat annoyed, and Valerie was embarrassed. "We'll go for it at night, it's still daylight, and we might attract a lot of attention," Lavinia said more calmly. Okay, let me know when we'll be leaving, Valerie said. Well, but speaking of another subject, how are you doing with the issue of you marrying Ryu? Lavinia asked, but she saw how some electric moments were released from Valerie. How am I doing? How am I doing? Well, shit. That bastard won't stop getting into my pants, he even does it in public, that son of a. Valerie said annoyingly. Do you have pants? Lavinia asked with a poker face, not believing what Valerie said, who only lifted her dress, revealing that she had on short shorts. You see, if I have, what? Did you think I had no moral sense? I'm not that cosplay girl from planet Earth. Valerie said, annoyed and offended. Yes, sorry, I didn't expect it, Lavinia said somewhat nervously, seeing that Valerie was more upset. What to say? He was sitting on an individual sofa, in front of him and on another sofa, Medusa, who was now wearing other, less revealing clothes. She seemed to be calm, with the exception that the tips of her hair were dyed black and formed snake heads. Apart from that, her gaze only saw Issei as prey. Still upset? Issei asked. Medusa looked at him with hostility. Yes. His answer was cold and simple, although Issei didn't even care. Well, since we are on the same side, you forced me because I got carried away, how about we start over? I don't want you to have problems and for you to stab me while I sleep. Issei said with a calm smile. The woman just looked at him in disbelief because of the audacity of her now master, but she just let out a sigh, knowing what happens if she doesn't behave properly. Okay, then what is your name, master? Medusa asked calmly. Issei only let out a sigh for the master, but decided to ignore it. Issei, just Issei, although maybe he'll give me a surname, I don't know, like Kanakin, Janashi or Goho. Issei said with an amused smile, but Medusa didn't understand what he said, so he let out a sigh. It's in Japanese, the first two are acronyms for Kage no Kunshu, Monarch of the Shadows, and the Gojo thing is from a fictional character. Issei said, and Medusa nodded. So how is this thing about languages? Asked Medusa confused. I'm a devil, I understand you, but those from Japan won't do it, so I'll have to teach you Japanese to avoid problems. Issei said, and Medusa nodded. Who will be with us? Asked Medusa. Those who are with us and those who will be with us. Said Issei with a smile. After that Igris came out of his shadow, which surprised the Gorgon, more to feel the aura of power of the night, although inferring her own, it was powerful. Where did it come from? I asked surprised. From my shadow, although there are more where that came from. Issei said calmly. Are they all the same as him? The curious Medusa asked. No, others are less powerful than him, others are magicians, archers, lancers and warriors. Issei responded calmly. How many are there? The woman asked. 76 and rising, Issei said with a proud smile. What are your real plans? Medusa asked seriously. Create my own faction. Issei responded simply, which brought the Gorgon out of the circle. What? But for that you need thousands, hundreds of thousands, and people who play important roles in your government, it can't just be warriors or soldiers. Said Medusa startled, without a doubt before her, there was only a madman. And who said that we will be that amount? We are only 4 people, me, and 3 others, including you now. Issei said calmly. Medusa just saw him as a fool and let out a sigh. Damn, I'm going to die. He said in a whisper and giving himself a facepalm, which offended Issei. Whatever. He looks at her from head to toe. Don't you have less revealing clothes? Issei asked. No. She answered simply and without importance. It's not like she cared how others saw her. Well, take. Through a magic circle, he took out some clothes that were his. Put these on for now, we'll go buy you something. Issei said calmly, handing him the clothes and beginning to leave the room. Why are you doing this? Medusa asked confused. Issei just shrugged. I feel bad seeing you like this, and yes, you are my slave, but I am not a bastard to have you in bad conditions. Look at our relationship as partners or master and servant. Issei said calmly and then left the room, being followed by Igris. Time skip. Issei and Medusa were walking through the city of Kuo. Neither of them were wearing anything to hide their identity, since no one knew who they were. Issei, because his appearance had changed, and Medusa, because no one had seen her, and those who knew her true appearance were already dead. Only Athena knew who she was. Although she doubted that Athena would remember her, and more so with men's clothes and a blindfold covering her eyes. Issei guides the two to the mall, although it was not necessary, since without sight Medusa moved and guided herself better than a person with perfect vision would, while some of Issei's shadows stayed organizing some things in their building. Meanwhile, Medusa and the black-haired man were in a clothing store. The Gorgon passed by each piece of clothing. Seeing which one caught her attention the most, Issei only followed her from behind without any interest, although he caught the attention of all the women who looked at him with hearts in their eyes, and the men looked at Medusa with lust. What should I wear? Medusa asked in a low voice, without drawing anyone's attention. Whatever you want, buy the amount you want, I don't care, besides, I can pay for it all. Issei said calmly. Medusa nodded and began to move, going towards some clothes. Shit, I didn't have to say that, now it'll take us longer. Issei thought, uncomfortable with the looks of the women and the envy of the men. Meanwhile, Medusa was collecting some clothes, although she didn't know if they would fit her. Issei noticed this and approached her. Hey, Anna, the changing rooms are over there, Issei said, surprising Medusa, who saw where Issei was pointing, which was some doors. Okay, thanks master, but what is this about Anna? Said Medusa. It would be weird to tell you about Medusa, a mythological being that everyone considers evil, in public. Issei said. Medusa let out a sigh and nodded, going to the clothing changing rooms. How about these clothes, master? Asked Medusa, putting on some glasses. The mark on her forehead was hidden. She was wearing a black turtleneck sweater and jeans. It looks great on you. Issei said, raising his thumb. Medusa nodded and approached him. What's wrong? Issei asked, confused. That's it, although I have more here, said Medusa, lifting a bag she had. Okay, but we can't leave with our clothes on, it would be better if you changed into the ones you had before, and then we go pay for it. Said Issei calmly. Medusa nodded and returned to the dressing room. Time skip. Issei and Gorgon walked outside the clothing store. It was almost night, in fact, both of them left the building at dusk. What are we going to do now? Asked Gorgon. Easy, to become very strong. Look, let me explain. My main ability is to become stronger with each being I kill, and you to have my mark of slavery. I can share that ability with you. Issei responded. Medusa nodded in affirmation. As they walked, the two passed by a bookstore that caught Medusa's attention, who turned around and looked at them with interest. Do you want some? Issei asked. I don't know Japanese, Medusa replied as she walked again. Okay, I'll show you later. Issei said calmly. Medusa agreed with that. Time skip. Issei walked through the halls of his building. He had given a room to Medusa, where he had some furniture such as a closet, a bed, and a nightstand. He walked alone and passed by a window, looking at the moon calmly. Igris appeared at his side. Issei turned to see him. The knight handed him a paper. Two female invaders are approaching from the north. One emits a demonic and dragon aura, the other is human. Valerie and Lavinia, what do those women want? Issei asked boredly. Igris just looked at him, waiting for an order. Go, I'll look through you. Issei said, his eyes shining, and in them Igris was reflected, while the knight's eyes shone in blue and purple. Somewhere else. Valerie and Lavinia walked through the streets of Kuo City, in Lavinia's hands, a necklace with a purple gem, which shone the more she walked. Didn't you think it would be ready before Issei was in worse condition a few days ago? Valerie asked, crossing his arms and looking at the blonde, as she walked. Don't expect it to take long, apart from the fact that finding Issei was more difficult. Said Lavinia with a sigh. The jewel was also made by Valerie. But before they could change any further, Valerie's pupils scratched, and the albino fired a blast of energy at a dumpster. What are you doing? Lavinia asked, surprised, but she was surprised to see that a dark mist came out of the container and took the form of knights with their weapons raised. The two of them became serious and prepared for a fight, but before her, another knight landed, raising a small smoke screen, but when it vanished, we saw him with another appearance. Go away, you are not welcome in our territory, said a voice through Igris, although he was not the one speaking. This is the devil's territory, Lavinia responded seriously. For now, answered the voice from Igris, so that later he would launch himself against the two women. Before that, Valerie activated his balance breaker and Lavinia her spells. But Igris proved to be faster, and in no time he already had Lavinia against the wall of one of the buildings, but the magician made him back off with a spell, which Valerie took advantage of to attack him and make him hit the ground, but Igris's body regenerated and hit the albino in the stomach, with enough force to leave her in shock. After that he got up and went against Lavinia. Who let out a sigh. After that, the environment began to be frozen, a small freezing mist began to form and a lot of ice, freezing blizzards and snow, began to form behind the magician, and soon a doll was formed. The Longinus doll Absolute Demise was formed behind the mage, since when she was touched by Igris, she could feel that her life was about to end, so she decided to activate her sacred gear and go with everything from the beginning. I really didn't expect that. Issei thought, looking through Igris, so the black-haired man let out a sigh. A portal of darkness formed next to him and he entered it. Lavinia's doll was about to attack Igris, but it was hit in the head, which was shattered into several pieces, which surprised Lavinia and Valerie, since that would require monster strength. Were you looking for me? Issei asked seriously and annoyed, looking at the two women from the neck of the doll. Her left eye shone purple, and the right one blue. The sclera of her two eyes was black. Lavinia's collar began to shine brighter, which surprised and shocked her. Issei just smiled at seeing that, and at great speed, he was already next to Igris, with the tracking collar in his hands. So this is how they found me? Issei said with a smile. Issei. Valerie said, approaching the black-haired man, but this son changed his smile to a monotonous face. What a pain, Issei said before squeezing the collar, which was destroyed by the pressure of the black-haired man's hand, which surprised the two women, who looked at Issei with their eyes wide open. Issei began to walk towards them, their shadows returned to him, except for Igris, who prepared himself, and at a great speed they both disappeared in a burst of speed. Issei appeared in front of Valerie. The black-haired man's hand was wrapped in energy that revolved around his hand. Issei punched her in the stomach, which pierced her armor and managed to do great damage that left her badly injured, causing her to become unconscious and fall to the floor. Igris finished destroying the doll that was beginning to regenerate and then attacked Lavinia, who had no chance and fell to the floor unconscious. After that, Igris approached Issei, carrying the blonde like a princess in her arms. Leave her, some of the others will take care of taking them to a safe place. Issei responded to Igris's silent question, but Issei noticed how the knight tilted his head in curiosity, to which Issei let out a sigh. I don't care about the two of them, I don't care, I could even hang them with my own hands now, but unfortunately if I kill them, they will be searched for, and perhaps they will blame me, even if they consider me useless, they are bastards who will look for the opportunity to screw up my life more. Issei responded calmly, and turning around later, Igris left the albino on the ground and followed his lord, some energy shadows of Issei and Ivan, to where the two females were, next to them the shadow of a magician, to erase his mind. Hey Albion, you better not say anything to the battle madwoman or she, the blonde and olive/dog will die. Issei said, bored but serious at the same time. The dragon didn't say anything and remained silent, but he could see a black and violet aura with light blue around the black-haired man. Albion let out a sigh, knowing that the boy was about to fall into absolute darkness, but there was something that had prevented him from doing so a long time ago. He just hoped that he would not reach the abyss. You know, I have a better idea, Issei said, turning to look at the two women, which made the dragon become serious. Time skip. Where did Master go? Medusa asked, wearing the clothes she had when she returned, but now she had a cover on her eyes. I went to take care of some annoyances, it's not a big deal, Issei said, calmly approaching her. But leaving that aside, why that cover on your eyes? Issei asked curiously. Lock the curse from my eyes, even though I can control it, I am not able to do it for a long time, so this allows me to block it, and do not worry about not being able to see, in fact, it guided me better this way. Medusa responded calmly. I see, it even matches your clothes, Issei said calmly and somewhat thoughtful. Well yes, it's something I got in the past, but that's not the case now, but I want you to clear up a doubt for me, said Medusa. What is it? Issei asked curiously. Why did you choose me? Medusa asked confused. Issei understood what she meant. I chose you for your abilities, such as petrification, your divine strength, as well as your power that surpasses most low middle-class gods, apart from the fact that I like vipers and snakes, although I am surprised that at my current level, I could make you my slave, without offending. Issei responded calmly. Medusa only remained silent for a short time. You have strange preferences, master. But if you need a sacrifice or something else, feel free to order me as you wish. Now, if there is no problem I will leave, I want to do some things, said Medusa, and then left the room, leaving in Issei, who had a drop of sweat in the most anime style. Well anyway, Igris prepares the other shadows and some things, we will go hunting, Issei said. Igris nodded and then disappeared. After that, Issei began to walk and left the room, heading towards another one where several shadows of magicians were studying a diary, book that was many years old. How are you doing with the diary of the biblical god? Issei asked calmly. The shadows nodded in affirmation. Diary of a biblical god? Medusa asked, entering the room when she heard what Issei said. September, one time me and some fools went to heaven. I went to the library and found it. I asked to take it, and they let me keep it, since they thought it was a useless and worthless book, since they didn't know that their father had written this book, Issei said calmly. Medusa understood and fixed her gaze on the book, which was ancient and emitted a slight divine aura. Can I read it? Medusa asked, interested. Do you know ancient Hebrew and Latin? Issei asked. No, I don't know those languages, Medusa replied, frustrated. Issei approached her and placed his hand on the woman's forehead. Hold still, I'll fix that stupid problem, Issei said. Medusa's eyes and pupils shrank, and then she moved away from Issei because of a headache and grabbed her head in pain. But before he could say or do anything, his brain started analyzing billions of words from different languages, every rule or law in every language, every norm, and then stored it. How are you? It's surprising how many languages there are, isn't it? Issei asked with a smile. Yes. Well, I can't really find the right words, said Medusa somewhat doubtfully, her headache slowly fading away. Well, then analyze your new knowledge. In the meantime, do you want to come with me? I'll go hunting, Issei said calmly. Hunting? Medusa asked confused. If I need some specific shadows on our side, and for that we will go to a place where there are many magical creatures affiliated with the devils," Issei said with a smile. At that moment, Medusa knew that her master would do some crazy or monstrous thing to everyone, although who was she to say something like that? After all, she killed all those she loved the most. Issei was dressing in tan clothes, black calf-high metallic boots, black pants with 4 pockets on the sides, a white short-sleeved shirt, a large black hooded coat, and black short-fingered fingerless gloves, and with a rectangle-shaped hole in the torso of the palm. From his hands he began to release magic of darkness and shadows, with which he formed a mark. Then he put on the mark and left the room where he was. After a short time he met Medusa, who saw him with confusion. "Why those clothes?" the curious jellyfish asked. "Nobody recognizes me anymore, that's true, but I don't want to ruin my now false identity, so I'll go dressed like this," Issei answered calmly. "I understand, would I also have to do the same?" asked Medusa. Issei nodded, and from a magic circle he took out a cloak, hood, which he gave to Medusa. The Gorgon saw it. It was black, with 2 protuberances that resembled the ears of a feline, with white details and some metal pieces on the sides, which were sharp, looking like small blades or kunes. "And how is it?" Issei asked, although he didn't seem interested in the answer, since he was looking at some things that Igris brought him. "It's perfect," Medusa whispered softly, then put on her hood, cape, which reached down to her calves. Yes, I know it's Medusa Lily, Lancer, but imagine that it's Medusa Rider, and that the cape, hood reaches down to her calves." "Sorry, but what did you say?" Issei asked, turning to look at her. She got nervous although she knew how to hide it. "Nothing, it's just that it's not bad," said Medusa, feigning monotony. "Well, I'm glad, are you ready to go?" Issei asked calmly. "Yes," said Medusa. Next to Issei a portal of darkness was formed. "Ladies first," Issei said mockingly. "How do you do that?" the jellyfish asked curiously. "I do it through a shadow that is in the place where I want to transport myself. I am still trying to do it in another way instead of portals or through my shadow soldiers," Issei responded proudly. "I see," said Medusa. After a brief moment, she entered the portal, being followed by Issei. Once there, Medusa managed to visualize that she was in a forest, although the atmosphere was charged with demonic and magical energy, along with the auras of several beasts. "Where are we?" asked Medusa, confused. "In the forest of familiars, although only the devils of the factions can enter here," Issei said as he started to walk. Medusa only followed him. "Who are you?" a voice asked beside them. "Kill him," Issei said simply. Medusa turned around, seeing a red-haired man, the cheap copy of Ash. She just took one of her daggers, nails, and threw it at the guy, piercing his neck. He didn't have a chance when Medusa pulled the chain and pulled back her pulsating short weapon. The familiar master fell to the ground holding his neck, but died shortly after from the rush of blood and air. After that, Medusa realized that Issei was ahead, so she began to walk until she was next to him. "Ready? Anything else?" the Gorgon asked. "No, now let's go. If you kill any beasts, my shadows will leave them somewhere safe for us," said Issei. From his shadow, some shadow soldiers emerged and entered Medusa's. "Will we separate?" the curious jellyfish asked. "No, we will go together, so follow me," said Issei. The Gorgon only began to walk in silence, leaving only the sound of her footsteps. Time skip. The 2 of them reached a hill where they saw some wyverns, a subspecies of dragons that only have 2 feet and 2 wings on the sides, and use them as front legs. Issei just approached them. He didn't care at all that they growled at him or were about to attack. Iron emerged and protected Issei with his shield. Issei just kept looking at each wyvern that was in the place. Until he saw one that caught his attention. His scales were white, his eyes golden, and he was of great size. Issei smiled, feeling the power of that sub-dragon that surpassed everyone in the place. "I want everyone dead, except the white one. I'll take care of him, so come out," Issei said, summoning his shadows. Issei materialized the weapons of his sacred gear and launched himself against a wyvern, who roared and jumped from his place and flew against Issei. But the black-haired man was surprised when the wyvern, at an absurd speed, was about to devour Issei. But he locked his jaws with one of the Reaper Gear's weapons, then settled in and hit the wyvern in the snout, which made him go against the ground of the mountain. Issei quickly got up and was about to decapitate the sub-dragon, but the latter gave Issei a tail whip. "Oh boy," against a wall. He would charge a breath of golden electricity and was about to launch it at Issei, but Igris appeared and placed himself in front of his lord and covered the 2 of them with his sword. The wyvern released his breath and it collided with Igris's sword, which began to absorb the electricity. The sword itself was wrapped in a celestial aura and retained the rays around the blade of the sword, and then launched a cut in the air and launched a ray that collided with the wyvern that was thrown to the ground. Medusa took advantage of that and moved at great speed, appearing next to the sub-dragon, propping up his 2 eyes. And then jumping back and throwing the chains of his weapons, which shone in celestial and lengthened, wrapping and holding the wyvern, Issei took advantage of that and went against the sub-dragon, decapitating it. Issei let out a sigh and turned to the sides, seeing that his shadow soldiers were finishing off the last wyverns. Issei then turned to look at Igris and gave him a thumbs up. The Shadow Knight nodded in agreement. After that, Issei stood up properly and moved, placing himself in front of the corpse. Igris placed herself next to Issei, as did Medusa, who concentrated her power around the corpse and the other dragon corpses. "Arise," Issei said. An explosion of shadows emerged from the corpse, and a silhouette stood up. I welcome you to the team, Kaisel," Issei said with a smile, looking at the shadow of the sub-dragon. "To be honest, this is impressive," Medusa admitted, surprised. But at that moment that Issei was going to speak, a wyvern appeared and went against Issei, but Medusa reacted quickly and immobilized the dragon with her chains, and then squeezed it with them. From the dragon only a loud clack was heard, and then it fell dead to the ground, all before the watchful eye of a surprised Issei. "Are you okay, master?" said Medusa, approaching a surprised Issei. Mentally the Gorgon smiled internally. "Yes, I'm fine," Issei said, coming out of his astonishment and looking away, feigning a monotonous look. Gorgon smiled, realizing that he managed to make fun of his master. "Now what?" Medusa asked excitedly, feeling the few forces she lost coming back and increasing more than they originally were. "Not much, we will continue killing some more creatures to strengthen ourselves and my army," Issei responded. "Okay," said Medusa, correctly taking her daggers. Days after, the familiar master was killed, Surzicha said seriously. What? But how?" Michael asked, surprised. "It is not known yet, only his corpse has been found at the entrance of the forest, which is stained by the blood of various magical beasts or different supernatural beings," Azazel responded, letting out a heavy sigh. "Could it be some survivor of the Chaos Brigade?" Auden said seriously. "That's probably it," Michael said seriously. "We should be more attentive to everything, and more so in Kuo, where our soldiers began to disappear," said Auden seriously. "It is still unknown what has been happening?" Zeus asked. "No, only small traces of blood are found in the last places they were reported to be or were." Surzichas responded angrily. Most let out a sigh. "We'd better start our defense moves now," Michael said seriously. "Yes, you're right, let's start with this right away," Azazel said. "Since I remember, isn't Penemu supposed to be in your place?" asked Surzichas, confused. "She's busy, and I don't know why, but she's very upset with me," Azazel said, letting out a tired sigh. "It's just a thing of us women, you wouldn't understand," Yusaka said with some irritation. "I didn't understand," Azazel said. The blonde just sighed heavily. "With Gorgon." The Gorgon was lying on her bed, a large, comfortable and luxurious bed. Her room already looked more like the one she had in ancient times, before Athena cursed her out of envy of the beautiful woman who was Medusa. Apart from something else that unfairly accused her, the Gorgon let out a sigh. She was wearing the clothes that she tried on the day that Issei took her to the mall. In her hands a book of Japanese legends. Issei offered to buy her some books, and she would not waste the opportunity. Although something was clear to her, Issei, although he acted mockingly and kind to her, she knew it was false. By looking at his eyes it was obvious that he was dead in life, and that his heart was only darkness. If Medusa talked too much or did something that the black-haired man did not like, he would kill her without any emotion, without pain or pity, without anger or hatred. Only an abyss will be what his eyes would represent at that moment. Although Gorgon highly doubted that he could do anything against her, as far as she knew, he was only a devil of darkness that reaches the top of the upper classes, while she reaches the divinity of the supreme high class. The difference was abysmal. Apart from the fact that she still does not use her beam up her sleeve, and that Issei does not know all her abilities. Medusa let out a sigh at the idea of having to kill Issei if he tried something against her. Would it hurt to kill him? The answer was no, it clearly wouldn't hurt at all, although she would feel somewhat depressed to tell the truth. After all, she would lose her source of free books and food, and she only has to kill supernatural beings to get that, and she didn't want to eat humans again. After trying Issei's food she was fascinated. Apart from being in a very advanced era than hers, she wouldn't know how to adapt without a tutor to help her do it, and that was something she didn't want. She looked back at her book for a few seconds, and then at the multi-story bookshelf. She had a small smile. At least she would enjoy the black-haired man's hospitality before he tried something against her, or she would try to get along with him, maybe in the future become friends, just maybe. Time skip with Issei. He sat down on a sofa, in front of him, a table that was surrounded by several shadow soldiers of the magician class. On the table a large plan of a sword, and next to Issei, Igris, who saw this confused and somewhat worried about the recent actions of his king. Damn, I just realized that I need builders to make most of my future plans or projects come true. He lets out a sigh. Now what will I do? Issei said, annoyed, but without knowing it, he was heard by a snake that approached and entered the room with curiosity. Did something happen, master? Asked Medusa curiously. Issei was surprised and turned to look at her, although later he looked back at the front, returning to normal. I have a problem. I need a builder or builders to forge or build some things, and my shadow magic is not enough for that. Issei said, annoyed. An imaginary light turned on in Medusa's head, which remained calm in its place. I have someone in particular, or rather some people. Medusa said, getting Issei's attention. Who would they be? Issei asked, interested and seriously. Hephaestus from the same Greek mythology as me, and the Nordic dwarves, who according to what I read about them, are great builders who invented great machines or weapons, as well as objects. Medusa said. Issei blinked a few times, but then let out a sigh. I don't think so, they won't help us at all. Hephaestus, why will he be crying over that bitch Aphrodite and the dwarves? Well, I went to see them once with Thor's company, and now I'm their enemy. Issei said, annoyed. Medusa had a small mocking smile. And who said we want them alive? Medusa asked. Issei smiled, and his left eye glowed purple. Now I like the sound of that, said Issei with an evil smile. I'm Skip. Medusa and Issei were riding on Kaisel, who landed at the entrances of a volcano that was destroyed. This is where Hephaestus should be, although the place is different from how I remember it, Medusa said, somewhat thoughtful. Things happened. Hades is nonsense, some wars, and the Traheeks is fun. It seems that they also affected this place. Apart from that, if I remember correctly, Hephaestus demanded more and more from him. At this point, he should be on his last legs, and more so when the humans have already stopped believing in them. That only caused him to not be able to recover faster, and took away some of his power. Issei said analytically and starting to enter. How's that? Medusa asked, not knowing the subject. The supernatural beings were powerful, unsaleable for humans, but as time passed and humans forgot them, they lost their power, since they depend on human faith to obtain energy, power and strength, so they are like parasites for humanity. Issei said calmly. But shouldn't they disappear? Asked the Gorgon, confused. They do not need human faith to exist, they have already separated themselves from human history, they only need them to be able to, apart from the fact that there are still humans who believe in them. Issei said calmly and without giving much importance to the subject. I understand. Analyze the place for a moment. The center of the place should be around here. Medusa said, moving to another hallway and being followed by Issei. Soon they would reach a gigantic forge connected to the lava pits of the volcano. In the center, and hammering a sword on an anvil, was there who they were looking for, Hephaestus, the god of the forge. Now that I think about it, will I be able to make him a shadow soldier? He is a god after all. Issei thought somewhat doubtfully. Are you coming for my skills or my soul? Hephaestus asked without interest and without taking his eyes off his work. Jail, they already discovered us, said Issei, materializing his sacred gear. I already knew they would come for me, Issei, Hyoudou and Medusa the Gorgon. Hephaestus said without importance and hammering the sword. Aren't you worried about us? Medusa asked, confused. I already know that you can kill me, Medusa. By the way, I'm sorry for what my sister Athena did to you. Medusa only looked at him with annoyance and hatred. Hephaestus let out a sigh. But the past is the past. Volley to see Issei. Bearer of the Reaper gear, are you coming for my soul as one of his soldiers or for my abilities? Hephaestus said grumpily. Does it matter? If I kill you I get both things, said Issei. Hephaestus smiled, more to dip his sword in oil. So you against me, if you kill me, I will not resist you turning me into a shadow soldier, but if I win, you will do what I say, what do you think? Hephaestus said with a smile, resting the sword he made on his shoulder. Shall we begin? Issei answered with a question. After that the whole place began to shake and began to move, rebuilding itself and transforming into a Greek combat arena. Issei just had a small smile. Medusa, knowing him, walked away and went to the stands to watch the battle between Death and the Forge. Issei went at great speed against Hephaestus, but he only blocked the Reaper gear weapons with his sword. Clack. Cracks began to form along Issei's two weapons, who was surprised by that. Come on, Monarch of the Shadows, can't you fight against this old man in his last moments of life? Hephaestus said mockingly. Issei just looked at him expressionlessly and walked away from the blacksmith. But the latter was covered from his sword by red lines along his body that looked like cracks and some light blue rays that looked something like flames, which made him faster and more powerful. Hephaestus began to give thousands of stabs that Issei could not repel in any way. Clack. 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 The fragments of the absolute gear were shot everywhere. Issei was in shock, which was taken advantage of by Hephaestus, who grabbed him by the leg and slammed him against the ground, then hit Issei in the stomach, causing him to spit blood. Your arrogance will be what ends up killing you, child. Hephaestus said angrily. Issei released a wave of power that took Hephaestus off of him and gave him time to recover. Issei got up from the ground in pain. He could feel that the damage from Hephaestus's fist was not only in his stomach, but that it was spread throughout his entire body, something that made him sore. "If you can't beat me in my fatal state, you won't be able to beat any being that surpasses me, and there are hundreds who do it," said Hephaestus, getting up from the ground and taking his sword, then starting to walk towards Issei. "I know, I'm still weak compared to those fools," Issei said, drawing the attention of Hephaestus and Medusa. The black-haired man walked and saw the ground, the fragments of his weapons. His shadows were not able to leave the shadow of his king because of a curse placed by Hephaestus. Issei knew that, but he did not care. He only moved some fragments and held in his hands the orbs of the weapons, which still shine in their respective colors. "But I plan to win and become stronger, to teach those fools a lesson and prevent them from hurting me again. I will be that supreme being that they will all fear," Issei said, and then broke both orbs. Auras came out of them, from the purple orb a purple one, and from the blue orb a bluish aura, which turned purple the more it entered Issei, who spat out some blood and breathed heavily. The black-haired man's eyes glowed purple, and his sclera changed from white to black, and a purple aura, and that of death began to surround Issei, who was beginning to recover. "I'm not used to power-ups, but I like this," he said with a smile, then seeing Hephaestus. "Ready for the real battle," Issei said. 2 daggers of darkness formed in his hands. After that he jumped forward, going at great speed towards Hephaestus, who smiled and blocked all of Issei's attacks with great precision, and then made a slash forward, sending a wave of pure electrical power, which Issei jumped to the highest point to dodge it. Hephaestus jumped, destroying the ground where he was, to try to cut Issei. But he created a shield of darkness that prevented the god from damaging him. Both fell to the ground after that, and began to attack each other again. The sound of their weapons clashing with each other could be heard throughout the place, while Medusa just watched the battle that was taking place, as did Issei's shadows. "Nice sword, I'll give it to Igris when I kill you," Issei said with a malicious smile. Hephaestus only got angry at the comment. "Concentrate," Hephaestus said, moving Issei away from him, then stabbing his sword into the ground and electric rays emerging from it, which Issei dodged at great speed. They land a cut on Hephaestus's shoulder, causing him to lose his left arm, and then kick him in the head. The Yui made the god fall to the ground, but still holding his sword. "Last words?" Issei asked without any feeling or emotion. "You let your guard down," Hephaestus said. His sword began to generate electricity, then an explosion of lightning emerged from Hephaestus, which sent Issei crashing into a wall. Hephaestus got up from the ground, supporting himself with his sword, and then began to walk towards the black-haired man. His sword began to glow and release electric rays. The god moved at great speed to cut Issei, but he only dodged the attack and tried to cut Hephaestus's arm, but he raised his arm, avoiding the black-haired man's attack, and then lowered his sword. Issei created a shield of darkness, which withstood Hephaestus's attack long enough, and then rolled to the right and jumped up and away from Hephaestus. The god wasted no time and swung his sword in the air, firing a pillar of lightning, which Issei dodged and went against Hephaestus, launching a kick that Hephaestus covered with his sword. But Issei extended his daggers and tried to cut Hephaestus, who released lightning bolts from his sword, causing Issei to move away from him. "Damn, this is taking longer than I expected," Issei thought, annoyed. Returning his daggers to normal, Hephaestus launched another electrical attack at Issei, who dodged it and went against the god. But once again Hephaestus blocked Issei's attack, who undid the dagger in his right hand to extend his arm, where from the palm, darkness began to emerge. "Game over," Issei said, and from the palm of his hand, stakes of darkness emerged and went against Hephaestus, who was pierced by the stakes, but using his last strength, he pushed Issei away from him. "I'm not going to die without giving my all, brat," Hephaestus said. His sword began to release more electricity. After that, they both looked at each other for years, and then Issei launched himself against Hephaestus, who raised his sword, which began to shine, illuminating the entire place and releasing thunder. After that Hephaestus made a slash towards the front that fired a gigantic blast of energy, which went directly towards Issei, who raised his arm, aiming at where the attack came from. Boom. The explosion that was present with the impact of Issei and the attack of Hephaestus was gigantic. Medusa worried for a moment and was about to jump to see if Issei was at least alive, but before doing anything, from the smoke screen that was created by the explosion, thousands of stakes of darkness came out of there and went against Hephaestus, sticking into him and taking him to embed himself against one of the walls. The god vomited blood, and Issei appeared in front of him, leaning on the wall. The black-haired man, who had his clothes destroyed and some of his own blood, looked at the god with completely purple eyes which shone in neon. "Any last words?" Issei asked. Not bad, brat," said Hephaestus with a smile, and then, Issei would grab the god's head and yank it off. It was hell in the village. The shadow soldiers went from one side to another, destroying everything. The Nordic dwarves tried to do something against them, but they surpassed them since they regenerated. Apart from that, the dwarves that died rose from the dead, now being shadow soldiers, but one stood out from all of them, and that was Igris, who carried the sword that Hephaestus forged and with which he fought against his king. The Shadow Knight carried the current leadership of the Shadow Army. Somewhere else, Issei was sitting on a sofa. Next to him was Medusa in her civilian clothes. Both of them were watching a movie. Wasn't it bad to leave Igris alone? Medusa asked doubtfully, although she really didn't care about the knight at all. No, anyway, Igris is one of the wings of my army, the current sub-leader of everything, until some shadow surpasses him or something like that, Issei said without much interest. I understand, but wouldn't it be better to be there? After all, you lose those to kill to become stronger, said Jellyfish, taking some popcorn. Not really, since if they kill and absorb their vital energy, I will still become stronger, and I also don't have to have any problems with reviving the dead, since I left it to some special magicians to do it for me, Issei said without much interest and eating some pizza. That explains a lot of things, Medusa said, going back to watching the movie. Time skip. I'm sorry, but the peace treaty with the Nordic dwarves cannot be made, Odin said in front of all the leaders, who looked at him in surprise. I also have bad news. Hephaestus, the god of the forge, is missing, probably dead, Zu said seriously. What? What happened? Michael asked, surprised and horrified. They found all their villages destroyed. The few survivors are children and women with some men, who told us that some soldiers from the abyss attacked at night and destroyed the entire place. They described it as if the darkness itself was devouring everything. After that, they fled from my faction and decided not to help us. According to them, the shadows had the energy of one of our soldiers, said Odin seriously and annoyed. His blood was found in the volcano of Hephaestus, right in his workshop that was transformed, literally, into a battle coliseum, and everything was destroyed. The aura of death and darkness was felt, apart from the snake, Zu said seriously. The aura of death and darkness, I only know someone with that, Serzicha said seriously. Yes, Issei, the bearer of the Reaper gear, Anubis said seriously. Odin hit the table hard, making some cracks, and then got up from his place. We must find him right now and bring him before us so he can tell us the truth, Odin said seriously and coldly. We are working on that, but those we send always disappear and do not return. Apart from that, currently it is not known where he is, Serzicha said seriously. Odin clicked his tongue in annoyance. Damn, Odin said angrily. Could you show us the image of what happened? Odin don't know, Michael asked. Odin nodded. Not even I have seen them. When I found out what happened, I came as quickly as possible and held the meeting, Odin said, creating a magic circle where a hologram was projected that showed what was happening. Issei's shadows were shown rampaging through the place, but a while later Igris, Iron, and Tank were shown, which surprised Serzicha and Odin. It can't be Igris, that soldier leading everyone is my knight Igris, Serzicha said surprised. Sure. I saw Igris and I admit that they look alike, but it can't be the, Michael said doubtfully. I recognize all my pieces and that knight is Igris, but now, he is a being of pure darkness, Serzicha said surprised. And that warrior with the axe and shield, along with the giant bear, are the reinforcements that I sent to Kuo and that never returned, Odin said seriously. Well, at least now we know what happened to the soldiers in their ranks. Now we have to know how they ended up like this and why, Zu said seriously. Damn, so many things happen and more are discovered, and there is no solution or answer, Serzicha said, massaging his eyebrow. But then someone would enter the room being a soldier. Leaders, they are attacking the fire right now, said the soldier, alarming everyone there. But Issei. I'll go out for a while, see you Medusa, Issei said, putting on a jacket. His clothes were completely black. Medusa just murmured in agreement while reading a book and eating some chocolates. Issei left his building and went out through an alley, passing the magic barrier that projected the illusion of the destroyed building. The black-haired man walked through the streets of the city. He wanted to go out and walk a bit, get some fresh air. The city seemed to be quite quiet, but turning a corner, he passed by a blonde-haired girl with blue eyes. Issei pretended to ignore her and went into an alley. Meanwhile, the woman passing by Issei felt his aura, which she recognized perfectly. After that, she turned around and saw how the black-haired man went into an alley. She ran after him, going into the alley but without seeing him. But before she could do anything, Issei was by her side and grabbed her by the neck and then slammed her against the wall. Long time no see, Seraph Gabriel, Issei said without any emotion, looking coldly at the blonde. Issei, said Gabriel in pain. What are you doing here? Issei asked, creating a dagger of darkness and placing it on the woman's neck without her noticing. I was looking for you, Gabriel said with some difficulty. Issei could feel that she was telling the truth, so he let go of her, letting her fall to her knees on the ground. What do you want? Issei asked without any interest and undid his dagger. I was worried about you. Gabriel answered honestly. Issei got angry. Don't lie, I know no one in the factions cared. Issei said with venom in his voice. Gabriel felt hurt by his words. That's not the case, Issei. She looks up, seeing Issei's lifeless and emotionless eyes, which shut her up instantly. Issei just crouched down to be at Gabriel's level, and so that he could hear him. Where were those people when I woke up in the hospital after being on the verge of death? Where were those people and you when I was banished from the factions? Where were you when I was about to die these weeks? Issei asked coldly. Gabriel began to cry. Issei just let out a sigh and got up, then began to walk towards the exit of the alley. You're not worth it, Issei said, but before he was at the end of the alley, Gabriel got up and ran towards him, without Issei noticing, and hugged him from behind, surprising him. Please don't go. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for not being with you when you needed me the most. There are no excuses, I let myself be manipulated by my brother to get away from you. But please don't leave me. You promised me when we were in the Garden of Eden, and I promised you that I would never leave you no matter what you did, no matter what you were like. Gabriel said through tears. Issei felt as if his heart contracted for a second, which confused him, but a memory came to his head. Flashback. In a once beautiful meadow, now destroyed, where Issei and Gabriel, both were injured, and were in the Garden of Eden, the sky had been attacked by the troops of the Cows Brigade, devastating everything in search of obtaining the secrets of the biblical god. Issei was bloody and resting on the legs of the blonde, who was crying for the state of Issei. Since he was the one who sacrificed the most for her to be well. Why cry over this useless guy? Issei asked with a light smile. Please don't say that, you are not useless, you are someone strong, and you have shown it to me. Gabriel said, seeing Issei's state. I'm just a being of darkness that doesn't hesitate to kill, regardless of whether it's innocent or not. Issei said calmly. His eyes had no sparkle of life. At that very moment Michael was arriving where they were. Then I promise to be with you no matter what, no matter who or what you are, no matter what you do or what you did, to show you that what you say about yourself is not true. Gabriel said with a smile. Issei laughed a little. Okay, then I promise to do the same for you, just so you see that you are wrong. Issei said. Michael just looked seriously. Flashback end. I remember that. But I've already killed many innocent people and even consumed their souls. Issei said, moving Gabriel away from him. That's a lie. Gabriel said through tears. Who do you think was the one who ordered the killing of the Nordic dwarves? Issei asked seriously. Gabriel was shocked by that. Why you wouldn't do that? Gabriel said. Issei just turned his head slightly and showed the angel an evil smile. I wouldn't do it, you're right about that, because I've already done it. Issei said and then looked back in front of him and started walking. Gabriel stood in place with his head down and shedding a few tears, but he clenched his fists and looked up, managing to see Issei being enveloped in shadows. She didn't think about it for a second longer and went to where he was, holding him and then hugging him again. I promised you, I will be by your side no matter what. Gabriel said determinedly to a surprised Issei. In the Issei building. Master, who is she? Medusa asked curiously, to see what between an explosion of shadows, Issei appeared being hugged by Gabriel. An acquaintance, Issei said without importance. Your guardian angel. Gabriel said, teasing the black-haired boy. A nuisance, Issei said, annoyed. Your guardian angel. Gabriel said in a pout to the black-haired boy, who let out a sigh. Look, I don't want to start a damn argument, jellyfish. The aforementioned looks at him. Don't say something important, please. Issei asked and then separated from Gabriel. Okay, master, said Medusa calmly. Who are you? Gabriel asked confused. I am Master Issei's servant, Medusa the Gorgon, said the purple-haired girl calmly, surprising Gabriel. But how? Gabriel asked surprised. It's a long story, Issei said without much importance. Really short, what happened? Medusa said, but Issei looked at her with deathly eyes, to which she fell silent, but she looked at him with an amused smile, already knowing how to annoy him. What happened? Gabriel asked curious and confused. Nothing important, we just met and now we are allies, it's not a big deal. Issei said without giving it much importance. Okay, you'll tell me more in the future, Gabriel said resignedly. Okay, although I doubt it, Issei said without any emotion. But after saying that everything remained in an awkward silence, Medusa looked at the two of them and smiled. She never imagined a being of darkness and one of light being in the same place without trying to kill each other, so to her amusement, she got up and began to walk towards the exit of her room. Issei was going to speak, but Medusa got there before him. I'll go to my room if you need me, master, see you and have good luck with your beloved, said Medusa winking and leaving the room. I'm not in love with her, Issei said in an inaudible whisper with a monotonous tone. How have you been? Gabriel asked suddenly, surprising Issei. Well, I guess, as far as good is considered. Issei said doubtfully. Damn, what's wrong with me? Why is this situation so awkward? Issei thought, annoyed. I'm happy for you, Gabriel said, knowing that he was lying to her. She lowered her head sadly. The black-haired man sighed and turned to look at her. Look. Let's forget what happened, everything, absolutely everything, including our promise. Issei said seriously. But, why? Gabriel asked surprised. It is a danger that you are with me, apart. His eyes shine in a threatening purple. I am no longer the same as before, and more than now I am the enemy of the factions. Said Issei. Gabriel looked up and only saw him for a moment. She only looked at him seriously after a few seconds, and with determination. I don't care. That surprised the black-haired man. I promised to be with you no matter what, and now I intend to fulfill that promise at all costs. I don't care if I fall. I don't care that my brothers see me as a heretic. My current mission, no. My reason for existing now is not to protect my father's throne, but you. Said Gabriel with a smile. Issei was more surprised and could feel his heartbeat once more, but the black-haired man only lowered his head. I'm not a hero, I'm a monster of darkness. Issei said coldly. A monster that needs warmth and someone to trust, Gabriel said, putting one of his hands on Issei's cheek, who had black sclera and his eyes glowing purple. I will not hesitate to kill any being that gets in my way. That goes for you too, and your brothers, nephews, children. Issei said threateningly. I don't have children, so I don't have to worry about that. My brothers have sinned. Michael changed the system completely. They betrayed a being of light who later became one of darkness. They manipulate humans to join churches, and thus join their ranks, and more so when the rewards for their achievements is to lose the freedom to become angels, and they manipulated me. They are no longer my sisters and brothers. Gabriel said calmly and with a kind smile. Can you say that about them? Issei asked incredulously. I am the angel of justice, Issei. I am the judge of this world and all its inhabitants. That includes my own brothers. It is decreed that they are sinners. Gabriel responded. And why don't you look for me? Issei asked seriously. I can't. The system that my father created specifically for me doesn't allow it. You are the only person I know who has the freedom to judge himself. Gabriel responded calmly. Issei let out a sigh. He had the ability to know who was lying to him, and unfortunately for him, everything Gabriel said from the beginning that he found her in the alley was true. I hate you. Said Issei annoyed. I know, but deep down you love me, Gabriel said with a smile. Weeks later. People have started disappearing around the city, Sona said seriously. I know Sona, but we can't do anything about it, especially in these times. Laria said with little interest. Sona let out a sigh. In fact, that's not entirely true, since I found a trail, but I need you to accompany me with your entourage. It could be a completely dangerous place. Sona said seriously. Isaac is busy with some things right now, so he won't be able to go with us. Are you sure you want to go? I asked, not very convinced. Yes, apart from that Canny will go with us anyway, so there won't be any problems. Sona said calmly. Riaz nodded. But Issei. He was at home, sitting on a couch watching television with Medusa and Gabriel, the same one after meeting Issei again, went every day she could to visit him. Issei tried to erase her memory, but the fact of being an angel gave them divine protection to their minds, which did not allow him to modify the angel's mind to Issei. Although the presence of the angel seemed annoying to the black-haired man, he was beginning to appreciate it in a certain way. By the way, one day Lavinia and Valerie looked for me. I beat them up, but through our shadows, I saw how they came again and again to look for me all over the city. Did something happen to them? Issei asked curiously. Well, yes, what I noticed, like the shadows you put on them, and that you modified their memories, it wasn't difficult for me to return their minds to normal. At that Issei snorted silently. But calm down, they don't hate you, they're just sad and hurt by what you did to them. Said Gabriel and Issei let out a sigh. I'm stupid, Issei said, annoyed. Relax, it's not too late to fix things with them yet. Gabriel said with a smile. Do you know that I don't trust her, and neither do I trust you? Issei asked without emotion. I know, after all, there was a reason you put some shadows on mine. Gabriel said animatedly and with a smile. From her shadow some sharp and monstrous eyes could be seen. Medusa only had a drop of sweat from the interaction of the two, but decided to ignore them and look back at the television. Whatever. Issei said without giving it much importance, but his eyes shined for a moment. What happened, Master? Medusa asked, noticing the shine in Issei's eyes. Just an alarm from my shadows. It seems that some supernatural beings of mythological class entered my territory. Issei said annoyed. What are they? Asked Medusa before Gabriel. High orcs, Issei replied without much importance. And what is your territory? Gabriel asked somewhat worried. The forest that surrounds all of Kuo and the city itself. I see why you're worried, but I'm not going. Issei said without giving much importance to the subject. But what if something happens to the people? Gabriel said. Issei looked away. There's a reason Riaz and Sona are here, right? Issei asked. But his eyes started to shine again, and he let out a sigh. Okay, I'll go. Issei said, annoyed. Long ago. This can't be happening. Said a girl from Kuo University, being in a group where Riaz, Akeno, Sona and Tsubaki were also present. It all started with a school trip to the forest surrounding the city, but things got complicated when red-skinned, red-eyed orcs attacked the group, killing some students for fun. They did nothing to avoid revealing the supernatural world, but if they were in danger at any time they would. After that, they were guided to the High Orc's lair, Maglajera, where it was shown that there were hundreds of thousands of them, although one sat on a throne proving to be the leader. Humans, what are you doing on my land? The orc leader asked with annoyance. No one spoke, they stood still before the imposing voice of the orc, even the devils who did not move from their place. The leader of the orcs only chuckled, watching this with amusement. Ahahaha, you humans are really funny, and without a doubt the devils are either damn sadists or simply worthless cowards. Said the orc, noticing the demonic auras in the group. I can't wait for the fun to begin. The tall orc leader spoke again, but before he could do anything, the doors were knocked down. Sorry for being late, but a black cat crossed my path and I had to take another route. Said Issei, wearing black pants along with dark metal calves, a white shirt, his magic necklace made by his shadow mages, and a high-tailed darkness coat that goes past his calves, along with a darkness mask. Next to him was Medusa wearing clothes made of darkness, her hood. Cape and a darkness mask that simulates a snake. Who dares to enter the territory of the great orc leader Kargalgan? Said the orc leader seriously. Death arises. Issei said, summoning his shadows. Iron and Igris placed themselves at his sides, while the shadow of the giant bear, called Tank, stayed behind Issei, being surrounded by his bear subordinates. DSK, finish them off. Kargalgan said with annoyance. Issei moved quickly towards the students to protect them, along with his shadows. Who are you? Asked a teacher. Issei just ignored her. Below the black-haired man, a purple magic circle appeared and created a small domino area, where the shadows in that area began to change from their light blue color to purple, with notable slabs being Iron, Tank, and Igris. Attack, Issei said when he saw the orcs going against them. The shadow soldiers went against the orcs, starting a pitched battle between the shadow army and the orc army, where each eliminated one from the other side, but the shadow soldiers regenerated thanks to Issei. Igris carried the sword of Hephaestus, he held it with both hands, and went at full speed through the orcs that fell to pieces when the knight wrapped in electric rays cut them. Iron shouted, drawing the attention of all the orcs, who went into a strange kind of rage upon hearing Iron's shout and turned their attention to him, who smiled and raised his battle axe and began to cut. Crusher crushed them all, while Tank accompanied him and Cutter crushed the orcs, killing them with ease. But unfortunately the soldiers of lower rank than them were losing. It was even difficult to kill an orc, needing several to be destroyed and regenerated several times, but due to Issei's area, they were becoming stronger and stronger. Things seem to be going well, said Medusa calmly. Hymn of the Flaming Fire. Said Kargalgan. Behind him a purple magic circle was created, and he fired a wave of fireballs, which began to eliminate all the shadow soldiers. Next time don't talk, okay? Issei said, annoyed. Medusa apologized, embarrassed and somewhat nervous because of Issei's look. Now what are you going to do, brat? Kargalgan said mockingly. I still have them left, and apart from that there is me. Issei said. Several shadow soldiers emerged and surrounded the students, while Igris, Iron and Tank, along with Medusa and Issei, went directly against the orc army. As if he could. Kargalgan said, but was surprised when Issei created a scythe of darkness and cut down 5 of the orcs that were there with a single slash. Medusa returned several with her chains, then pulled them and broke their bones. Meanwhile, the 3 shadows finished off the rest of the orcs, under the watchful gaze of hatred and anger of Kargalgan, who rose from his throne. Hymn of the Fire Dragon. Kargalgan said. Behind him a magic circle formed and his hood transformed into the shape of a dragon's mouth, which spat out a huge ray of fire at Issei. Issei only transformed his scythe into a shield and covered himself. After the attack subsided, he destroyed the shield, and Medusa threw her daggers at the orc leader, but one of his 4 guards stood in front protecting him. We'll have to kill them first so we can kill the leader. Issei said without emotion. Medusa was enveloped in purple electrical rays and pulled on her chains, going against the orc holding them. The Gorgon connected a double kill that broke his ribs and caused him to crash into a wall, killing him instantly, then spun in the air and wrapped her chains around the neck of another, and then pulled them and broke the neck of the orc, who fell dead to the floor. Meanwhile Issei only had the other 2 with 2 daggers of darkness, killing them quickly. Well, we've already finished off your guards. Issei said with a smile under his mask. Even with them dead, they will not be able to against me and my army. Just look at your soldiers. For now they will be able to against my army, but soon, even regenerating them, more of my orcs are arriving, and in a short time our numbers will surpass you," said Kargalgan with a smile. "Well, if things are like that, I only have to demonstrate the unbreakable dominance of a necromancer," Issei said. His eyes shone through the mark, and the deceased orcs began to emerge as the living dead, now being Issei's property and now part of the army of shadows. What the hell, putting my men against me?" Kargalgan said, annoyed. "That's right, and that includes those still alive. Aim for Kargalgan. And when all this is over, you will join my ranks," Issei said, encouraged by the idea. After that, a shadow magician appeared next to Issei, who placed his hand on the shadow's shoulder, which turned purple. The shadow raised its arm where a huge sphere of fire was formed, which the magician threw towards Kargalgan. Kargalgan said in front a shield began to form, but the sphere of fire destroyed it, raising a great cloud of smoke. When the smoke cleared, it showed Kargalgan badly wounded, his mask had been destroyed. You will pay. Hymn of rage. Hymn of strengthening. Hymn of giants," Kargalgan said. A dark magic circle appeared behind him, and along with that, a large amount of purple light and energy began to envelop the orc, who grew in size now resembling a giant. "Friend, I have bad memories with enemies of your size or larger," Issei said, somewhat discouraged, dodging a stomp from the orc. "Don't act arrogant, devil." His throat began to shine and swell, while the symbol of a dragon appeared behind his head. Kargalgan, do I still seem to be inferior to you?" The orc asked and then fired a bit of fire, which was dodged by Issei and a half with great ease. "Yes, since after all a sorcerer without his guards is nothing more than cannon fodder," Issei said and then began to make multiple cuts on the colossal orc. Kargalgan fell to the ground badly wounded and returning to normal. Issei only approached him, an evil smile appeared on his face. I told you that you will join my ranks," Issei said maliciously. "No, I can't die here." Kargalgan screamed in pain as the shadows of his guards rose from the death and killed him with their weapons. Arise," said Issei, and Kargalgan's body was enveloped in shadows, so that later a red and black silhouette with light blue rose in front of Issei, before the attentive gaze of the students, but above all of Riaz and Sona and their two queens who saw everything with absolute horror. Well, I'm going to give you a name," Issei said animatedly. Medusa saw him with a drop of sweat in the most anime style. "Let's see, your original name was Car something, but I'll call you Tusk. How's it going?" Issei said animatedly. Tusk nodded happily while Medusa facepalmed her face at her master's idiocy. After that, Issei and Medusa turned around and were a little surprised and had a sweaty date when seeing the shadow soldiers playing cards with Iron and Tanks, who had already finished off the orcs on their side, as well as Igris, who went towards Issei and stood next to him. "Well, you did everything right today, but you need training and so do I, since you get stronger when I get stronger too," Issei said, but at that moment he was defended by someone. "Stop right there, the heiress of Gremory orders you," said Riaz, standing in front of Issei and creating a magic circle, as did Sona and the two queens. "Step aside," Issei said, raising a finger and sending a wave of pure magical power flying through the air. "What are we going to do with them?" asked Medusa, pointing at the servants who looked at them with fear and terror, just like their master. "Let the factions take care of it, I'm leaving here now," Issei said. All his shadows returned to his shadow, and Medusa quickly grabbed him by the shoulder when the black-haired man began to be enveloped in shadows, darkness. "How's the Chimera Ant experiment going?" said a white-haired man with red eyes to a scientist. To put it mildly, Lucifuge-sama, the queen began to reproduce more ants, now more evolved, and beginning to have humanoid forms. These are high elite class. If we wait a few more days, she will begin to create high-class warriors, but with good luck, and seeing herself threatened, she will create a supreme ultra-class," said the scientist with a smile. Euclid smiled with satisfaction at what the scientist had said. "Okay, send a battalion of upper-class people to put some pressure on the queen," Euclid said with a smile. "Okay, Lucifuge-sama," said the scientist to return to the monitor. Days after, everyone was in an important meeting. The anti-terrorist DXD team, such as the faction leaders and companions, along with the pillar of the factions, were talking about various important issues. "Has Issei Hyoudou not been found yet?" Auden asked seriously. "No, his whereabouts have not yet been found," Gabriel responded calmly. "Why are you looking for that useless guy?" Isaac asked, confused. "We suspect that he has been involved in the disappearances of several units that we sent after him, apart from the fact that his sacred gear may be linked to an object that was found in the Himalayas, which has the same aura as the Reaper gear, and apart from that it is dangerous for any living being that is within its reach." Azazel said seriously, surprising everyone except Penemu, who was at his side and knew his ex-leader very well. "What is that object?" Valerie asked, curious and with her arms crossed. Its name is the Reaper Crystal, created by my father to retain the excess vital energy of people who died throughout the human or supernatural world. Apart from that, wherever it is, it spreads the darkness of the abyss, devouring everything it touches. We cannot contain it, because we cannot get close to it, or else we will die. Michael responded seriously. How powerful would it be? Lavinia asked seriously. It is the most powerful object among the worlds and their dimensions. Without a doubt, whoever possesses it will be able to change the world at will. Michael responded again with utmost seriousness, surprising everyone who had no knowledge about it. And why weren't we warned about that before? Zeus asked seriously. We were going to tell him once Issei was here, but it seems that the soldiers we sent after him are still coming back. Azazel said seriously. Penemu looked at him with hidden disbelief, since he didn't even know that the ex-leader of Grigori was doing that. At least he already knew about the disappearances of his fallen. But that didn't stop him from looking at the black-haired man with great anger and rejection. Then we have to find him at all costs. If what they say is true, his sacred gear has some connection to this object, said Anubis, wearing his armor, which he wore 24 hours a day and everywhere. His metallic voice resonated throughout the place. And what happened to him? Weren't the servants supposed to have left him stranded in Kuo? Riaz asked without the slightest interest in the black-haired man. We left him there. Even the barrier covering the city has not detected that he had left, Serzicha said seriously. I also detect identities of the dark attribute and leftovers. Apart from that, they enter and leave the city all the time, but there are places where their presence disappears. Unfortunately, they are random, so we cannot track them. Apart from all that, it is estimated that they are part of the army of shadows that attack the villages of the Nordic dwarves. Apart from that, it has the same death aura as Issei and the one found in the forge of Hephaestus, Azazel added seriously, to which most let out a sigh, and the youngest with evidence got angry because they gave too much importance to a nobody. This is getting more and more complicated, Auden said, frustrated, and several agreed with him. But while that was happening, Gabriel saw Lavinia and Valerie, but more specifically their shadows, in which for a second eyes or the shape of the holes of an armor visor were seen. But without her realizing it, Lavinia already knew about the shadows that she had as well as Valerie, and both looked at the shadow of the seraph seriously, seeing the same eyes, but more furious, sharp, dangerous, and some purple, showing that the shadows she had were more powerful. With Issei, he was lying on the floor of his room, holding his head and enduring intense, unbearable pain, while the voice continued to echo. Issei, come to me, come to me. You need me and you know it very well. There is no reason to be apart any longer. Medusa threw water from a glass she brought to bring Issei out of a state of shock and total unconsciousness. Once the black-haired man came to, he quickly got up and looked everywhere. He would swear he had been in a completely black place. It was like the abyss. Master? Medusa called him softly as she approached him. Are you okay? Asked the Gorgon, putting her hand on the black-haired man's forehead to check him. For a moment the impulse to kill invaded Issei, but he ignored it and let Medusa approach him and place her hand on his forehead while he tries to calm down, which works perfectly. I am, Issei said emotionlessly and with empty eyes. Master, don't lie, come, you better rest, said Medusa, holding Issei and carefully dragging him to form a snake in his hair and move the sheets. After that she placed the black-haired man on the bed, who was still sweating. Damn, that damn headache weakened me so much, I didn't have to use all my power to avoid it. Now I'm tired, in pain and at the mercy of this snake, Issei thought, disgusted, seeing Medusa, although she remained calm, but at a correct assistance from her master, since she could feel his displeasure at the situation they are in. You should rest the rest of the day. I advise you to stay calm, jellyfish. I just have to kill something, Issei said calmly. That is impossible in his current state. He would not be able to give the order to bring him a living being to kill. It is not his style, nor will his shadow soldiers killing a living being recover it. Perhaps his power and strength are merciless every time they kill a living being, but that does not allow him to recover from his wounds, Medusa said. Issei just snorted silently. I hate it when you're right, Issei said, letting out a sigh. But you love that, Medusa said with an amused smile. Issei just let out a small sigh and looked away. Don't make fun of me, Issei said dejectedly. Oh. Master, you don't have to be ashamed, your dear slave will take care of you, Medusa said calmly and with an amused smile. Issei just ignored her and closed his eyes with the intention of sleeping, which he managed to continue ignoring Medusa's teasing. Time skip. Issei woke up after a few hours of sleep. The first thing he saw was Medusa sitting in a chair next to the bed he was in. I see you've woken up, master, said Medusa calmly, even though she was in her place. Gabriel has come one by one? Issei asked without giving much importance to what Medusa said. He could feel his head still spinning. No, Sarah-san hasn't arrived yet, Medusa replied calmly. How long have you been there? Issei asked, closing his eyes. since he fell asleep. Looks at Issei for a moment. Do you want me to bring you something to eat? Asked measured. Issei nodded and the Gorgon got up from her place and then headed to the exit of the room. After a short while he would return to the room with a tray with food. Did the shadows help you? Issei asked with a mocking smile. Medusa snorted internally, although it seemed strange to her that the black-haired man acted in such a mocking way suddenly. Are you okay, master? Medusa asked. Issei just looked away. No, I don't. Issei replied and then let out a sigh. Medusa approached him and placed a hand on the teenager's forehead, noticing that he had a fever. He has a fever, Medusa replied, and Issei let out a sigh. Damn, my defenses are down. I sure look pathetic now. Issei said, putting his entire arm over his eyes. Medusa only saw him delirious from the fever. It would be better for you to rest, master, said Medusa, leaving the tray with food on a table next to the bed, already comfortable with Issei in his place in a better way. I don't want to, there's too much to do, Issei said, trying to get up, but Medusa denied him. No, it is better that you stay in your place and rest. If it is to your liking, I will stay with you, Medusa said, putting Issei back in his place, who looked away. Now what is it, why so much concern for me? Issei asked with boredom. Medusa blinked a few times, confused. It's normal, you are my master, answered Medusa calmly. If I die you are free, even if you have difficulties in adapting in this era, you will achieve it sooner or later, after all that bitch cursed you with immortality, Issei said discouragedly. Are you implying that I can kill you at any moment? Medusa asked, slightly surprised. Do I have some of your trust? Issei asked. Medusa just remained silent, which gave Issei a reason, who let out a sigh. This annoyed Medusa, who saw him offended, although she did not show it. And do you trust my presence? Asked Medusa. A little, but yes, I do, apart from the fact that your presence is comfortable in this place of the undead. Issei responded calmly, surprising Medusa. Why? Because he trusts me. He knows that if I want, I can kill him at any moment. Medusa asked coldly. Only the betrayed know who to trust, and what can I say, among the betrayed we trust more. Issei responded with a slight mocking smile, intriguing Medusa. Master? I call the black-haired man jellyfish. What's wrong? Issei asked, confused. What did they do to him? Medusa asked curiously, seeing how Issei was somewhat thoughtful, and finally let out a sigh. Well, I'll tell you, I don't care if you know anyway, apart from the fact that I have nothing better to do, but still don't interrupt if it's not important or you have a serious question. He clears his throat. It all started the day I was born. On a stormy night, the doctor who assisted in the delivery remembered the story of someone who on a rainy and stormy day a baby was born. The one who assisted in the delivery said that it would be a child of darkness, but the mother said that it would be a child of light. Which is what happened, and now that person is one of the foundations of this era and of humanity, but I digress. When the doctor remembered that story, he told my mother that he was healthy and all those things of comfort in the face of the hellish pain she had, and that he would be great and a being of light. Ironic to tell the truth, since she said with disgust and hatred that he would be a being of darkness. And now look at me. How do you know all this? The curious jellyfish asked. I don't know, I just know that I remember every second since I was born, but whatever, I keep going. From that day on, my parents reluctantly took care of me, but when I reached a certain age, I think at 7, they began to abuse me verbally and physically. My brothers followed their actions and did the same, and it continued like this throughout my life, abuse after abuse. My brothers always spread false rumors about me wherever we went, which made everyone hate and disgust me. Although I managed to make friends, we had to separate because their parents decided to move somewhere else, or due to personal reasons. Until one day I met a girl. Yuma was her supposed name, but she was just a fallen bitch who used me and deceived me, then killed me. But unfortunately I live in a devil territory, and one of the heirs of this place reincarnated me in one of her servants, but nothing improved. Everyone continued to hate and despise me for my sacred gear that was supposed to be weak. I suffered and suffered. Those bastards didn't help me at all, and just left me fighting alone. I almost died several times. Unfortunately I fell in love with several unfortunate women, who made fun of my feelings. Some agreed to be my girlfriends, only to later record themselves having sex with my brother, and show me the video in my face. Anyway, I'm not good at this love thing. What happened next? Medusa asked curiously, not allowing Issei to see what she was feeling or thinking. Not much, we fought and fought, or rather I fought against opponents beyond my league, but anyway, I won, barely, and I survived everything, although I was always on the verge of death, but I always came back. Until that day, they sealed my powers and beat me until they were satisfied. Then they threw me into the human world, saying that I was banished from the supernatural world. Then some things happened that weren't very important to you, and in the end I met you. The black-haired man finished recounting calmly. Medusa nodded and began to process the information, although she knew that there was a lot missing and that he didn't tell her the whole truth, but it was still enough. "Thanks for telling this, I think," Medusa said, but Issei interrupted her. "Don't tell me your story, do it later," Issei said calmly, interrupting the Gorgon. "Why? What's the problem? Why not now?" the purple-haired girl asked, curious and slightly surprised. "Are you doing this because you trust me, or because you see it more as an obligation and duty as my servant?" Issei asked with a slight mocking smile. Medusa did not respond, remaining silent instead. "See, that's why I say don't do it, it wouldn't make sense, and it wouldn't have any value anyway, although I can't say much about myself, he really doesn't give a damn about my past," Issei said and then closed his eyes and settled into his place. Gabriel-sama has changed quite a bit," Medusa said with a slight smile. "It's not like I could do much against her, it's having her by my side screwing everything up, but asking to control her so she doesn't say anything, or killing her once and for all, although the latter would bring me a lot of problems, so I'm not doing it. For now," said Issei calmly and quietly. That would be a shame, in a way your presence is nice," said Medusa somewhat discouraged. "I know, but I really don't want to be a slave to them again," Issei said calmly. "Yes. I don't really know how it feels to be a slave, since you don't treat me as such, but I do know what it feels like to have your wings torn off and your freedom taken away," Medusa said, but she didn't receive any response, so turning to see Issei, she would realize that he was asleep. She just smiled lightly, admitting that the image of the black-haired boy sleeping was really peaceful. Good night, master, it's a shame that you won't try the food that I prepared myself," Medusa said, caressing Issei's head and then getting up from her place and heading to the exit of the room, but not before seeing Issei one last time, and the image of a brown-haired boy and a black-haired boy stood in his way. It is strange that you remind me of the first man who stole my heart and the man I hate the most, but whatever, it's a new beginning and a new life in this new era," Medusa said in a whisper and then left the room, leaving a sleeping Issei who was resting peacefully. Weeks later. "What's wrong, Ajuka?" Surziches asked, surprised to see how the scientific devil suddenly entered his office. He looked worried and scared. "There is trouble, we are being attacked by ants," said Ajuka. Surziches saw it as if a screw had fallen from him, but upon noticing this, the supreme class devil created a magic circle that projected several recordings in real time, showing how hundreds of ants invaded the gates of the main city of the Inflaming. The soldiers and guards of the city of Lilith fell on the battlefield, but stealthily, and those who tried to flee were killed by ants that shot acid or caught by flying red humanoid ants. "What the hell do you expect then? Release the high-class soldiers," Surzich shouted angrily. Ajuka just shook his head. "Those are the high-class soldiers and they are all being eliminated in seconds." Ajuka responded seriously, surprising the red-haired man. "Call DXD now," Surzich ordered seriously. "I've already done it and no one answers." Ajuka Surzich responded and just let out a sigh of annoyance. "What to say?" This same one was on top of a building with his clothes of darkness, purple, watching how the soldiers died by the ants and by his shadow soldiers that he dispersed in the place so that they would kill and thus obtain more power and strength. Medusa was standing at his side and with her cape. Apart from having changed her clothes to black and loose ones so that her body could not be seen, and it was difficult to identify apart from that her hair changed from lilac to a darkened navy blue almost black, and she had a mask of darkness that Issei gave her. "Don't you think you're being very naughty today, master?" Medusa asked, although she didn't really care what happened to the soldiers. "Not really, since I'm only here for the king," Issei said, seeing how several of his soldiers were dissipated and several ants were annihilated. "These bugs are being a nuisance," Surzich said annoyed. With Michael and Azazel at his side, the three of them quickly annihilate the ants. "It's good that you asked for reinforcements from us, since a new horde of ants is coming," said Azazel high in the sky watching as more ants came in the distance, but he managed to see a black blur that passed at a fast speed, annihilating several demonic, angelic and fallen knights. "Shit," Surzich complained as his arm was melted by the blood of a shooting ant. "These things are really guts," said Michael taking the devil and moving away from the place. Quickly an angel approaches the two. "Michael-sama, allow me Surzich Dono to heal you," the angel said seriously. "Okay," said Michael leaving Surzich on the ground. "Won't his magic hurt me?" Surzich asked, watching as a golden aura emerged from the angel's hands, but it turned dark green. "It would be like that, but I'm separating my sacred aura from my healing magic, leaving a neutral aura, which allows me to heal other beings, including those who are weak to the sacred," Light said as he began to heal Surzich. The angel's magic was so powerful that it regenerated the arm of the Crimson Mau, who was surprised by that. But they had let their guard down, and the blur was coming towards them at high speed, but they managed to stop it, or rather, deflected with a magic shield. The blur of speed went against them, but Michael created a sword of light and cut it in half, revealing itself to be a greyish ant with blue eyes. What? Surzich said to see the ant, but he remained silent when a murderous instinct took over the entire place, paralyzing them. Azazel was thrown to the ground, with his left sacred gear arm destroyed and with several cuts on his badly injured body. After that, a new blur of speed appeared and landed in front of all the leaders, raising a smokescreen, which dissipates after a short time, revealing a black humanoid ant with crimson eyes, with wings and two smaller, thinner arms coming out of its abdomen. The reddish aura surrounds her, being of pure murderous instinct that immobilizes everyone, but Surzich acts and fires an attack of destruction that the ant undoes with a movement of his hands, then goes against Cha, hitting her in the stomach, sending her flying. "That ant is not normal at all," said the jellyfish, surprised. "Yes, I would dare say that his only goal in living is to kill," Issei said without emotion, observing what would happen next. "Quick, there's no time to waste," Michael said seriously, but that ant appeared in front of him, hitting him in the abdomen, sending him crashing into a building. Surzich, who managed to react, moved away and was about to attack the ant with his power of destruction, but at that moment the ant itself grabbed his arm, breaking it and tearing it off. Then tearing it off and sending Surzich flying backwards. Light was the only place and the only thing the ant noticed. Unfortunately for the angel, everything around him became completely dark. The ant had devoured Light's head, his body fell to the ground lifeless, and then the ant devoured Surzich's arm. All before the watchful, horrified eyes of those present. "Who is the king of H here?" the ant suddenly announced, surprising everyone even more. They never believed that thing could speak, and that same thing got angry at not receiving any response. "I asked, who is the king of this place?" the ant asked again angrily, scaring those present, because it released a large amount of murderous instinct. "It's me." A distorted voice answered behind him. When the ant turned around, she saw Issei walking towards her, with his hands in his pockets, next to Medusa, who was carrying her chains in her hand. "Are you the king?" "Not being able to is weak. You are not worthy of being the king who will fight with me," the ant replied with superiority. "And you are?" Issei asked curiously, ending up in front of the ant. "I am the Ant King, and I demand more respect from you, pathetic devil," said the Ant King seriously and superiorly. Both looked at the dinos while expelling their respective auras, causing the clash of purple and crimson. "The only one who has to respect here is you," Issei responded without hesitation. "And who are you to ask me that?" the Ant King asked angrily. "Your future king," Issei responded with authority and confidence, bothering the ant. "How dare you disrespect me?" the Ant King shouted, launching an attack towards Issei, connecting with him and creating a large smoke screen. "That guy is crazy," Surzich said in disbelief, stopping the bleeding on his arm thanks to a magic circle. "What did you expect? That's the guy who's been causing us problems with his shadows," said Azazel, arriving where he was. "Is that him?" Michael asked, confused. "That's right, although he's wearing different clothes," Azazel said seriously. Meanwhile, the smoke screen slowly dissipated, and once done, it showed the Ant King offsetting the left side of Issei's face, who didn't even flinch. "But wah? What?" the ant asked incredulously. "My turn," Issei said, hitting the Ant King on the head, causing him to kneel before the King of Death. "Unfortunately, you only learn from pure beatings," Issei said before kicking the ant's abdomen, breaking its exoskeleton and sending it back a few meters. "Medusa, you and some shadows make sure they don't interfere," Issei ordered before starting to walk towards the Ant King, who was getting up in pain. "Okay, master," answered Medusa, also with a distorted voice, before some shadows emerged and followed her, moving away from her master's fight. Interesting, you get the abilities of Eli that you eat," said Issei, watching as the ant began to use the same healing magic as Light. "Of course I can. I am the ultimate creation of the queen, and my duty is to annihilate everyone who gets in my way, kill other kings, obtain more territory and food for my queen," said the Ant King seriously, while he stands up already recovered. You will be of great use to me in the future," Issei said with encouragement, giving a smile to the ant, who, angry, increased in size and charged at Issei. Clack. 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 Swift blows struck the Ant King, breaking his exoskeleton from his abdomen again, knocking him back to the ground on his knees. "It's stupid what you did. It's true that you became stronger and your defenses increased, but your speed was lost. Just look at what I achieved. With acceleration and speed, I enhanced my blows, increasing the power of this," said Issei, looking down at where the ant was. "I'm going to kill you," the ant roared with hatred rising from the ground. "Yes, whatever, if it's not bothering you, let's highlight my style," Issei said, creating a simple dagger of darkness. The Ant King went against Issei, but he disappeared in a burst of speed and began to make multiple cuts to the ant's exoskeleton. In all directions, the ant was cut, destroyed, and then received a blow to the face that sent it back to the ground. This has to be BNN nightmare, the ant said with difficulty as he got up from the ground, using healing magic on him. And indeed I am your worst nightmare. Issei said mockingly, getting a little closer to the Ant King. At that instant, the ant lost mass and moved at sonic speeds, but its attacks and dagger-like claws were easily stopped by Issei, who blocked the ant's attacks with his forearms and then at a higher speed hit it in the abdomen, causing it to retreat and then create another blow and at high speed begin to cut the Ant King again, destroying and breaking its exoskeleton. The ant fell weakened to the ground again, now its head being trampled by Issei's foot, who mercilessly trampled it again, almost embedding it in the ground. "Weren't you going to kill me?" Issei asked mockingly, the ant only growled annoyed. The sister of the Ant King launched herself towards Issei, who jumped out from on top of the king and creating a scythe, cut the other ant in half, killing it instantly and horrifying the king. "I have to run away and get stronger, I can't beat him right now," thought the Ant King desperately, getting up from the ground and using healing magic, he managed to heal his important parts and spread his wings. "Where do you think you're going?" Issei asked coldly, with his scythe he made a cut in the air, cutting the wings of the Ant King, causing it to fall to the ground. "Shit." He cursed as he watched Issei approach, until he suddenly disappeared. "He left?" he asked himself, then felt his head fall and soon after he rolled on the ground. "Arise." The command was always enough, so that through an explosion of darkness and shadows, a new Ant King rose, now being of shadows and blue shadows, this same one knelt before the presence of his new lord. "Welcome to the group," Issei said with a smile. "Thank you my lord for welcoming me," said the shadow of the Ant King with respect and education, surprising Issei. "Can you speak?" "No, even more importantly, how?" "None of my other soldiers possess that ability," Issei asked seriously. The Ant King looked at himself and then at his hands. "I don't know my lord, I only know that I have the ability," said the Ant King confused. "This changes things, speaking requires a thought that analyzes and organizes the words that will be said in the future." The black-haired man thought seriously, looking at the ant seriously. "Will you betray me in the future?" Issei asked coldly and seriously, for many, a silly question, but for him logical and correct. Even with that, he knew very well whether the ant would lie to him or not. "I admit that before I wanted him dead, my delos, and it is something that I regret very much with all my soul, and that will not happen again, but now, my only obligation and concern is to serve you, my lord," said the ant, kneeling even more and resting her forehead on the ground, all in the presence and in front of Issei, who only let out a sigh. "Don't do such stupid things, get up." The ant obeys him, getting up from the ground. "A question, do you have a name?" Issei asked curiously. "No, my lord, the closest thing to that is the title of Ant King," the ant replied calmly. "That sounds like those ridiculous names of heroes or villains from comics or even One Punch Man, but whatever." He looks somewhat thoughtful after those words and looks the ant in the eyes. "From now on you will be called Baru, is there no problem?" Issei asked and informed calmly and quietly. "No, my lord," replied the ant without any disrespect. "Okay. Look how more ants approach, fighting against soldiers and some of them were heading towards them." "My lord, is something wrong?" Baru asked curiously, seeing how Issei remained silent. "I want you to kill all these soldiers and all the ants that are here, then take me to the place where you came from," Issei ordered seriously and without any emotion, pointing at the approaching soldiers and next to the ants that are fighting with more soldiers. "At your command, my lord," said Baru before going against those who were once his companions, now being enemies by order of the black-haired man, who smiled at the results to see how Baru destroyed and cut everything living that crossed his path. "What are you doing?" Issei asked with a poker face, watching Baru who was writing down in a notebook what Issei was doing. "Nothing my king, I'm just writing down your taste so I can be more useful," Baru responded calmly, narrowing his eyes. "How does that help you be more useful?" Issei asked after reading the newspaper and drinking coffee. Medusa was next to him, just woken up, also reading the newspaper and drinking a cup of tea. Next to them was Gabriel who was enjoying his breakfast made by Issei. "I will be able to serve you better than the other shadows," said Baru with a smile and a smile of eyes. The shadows working around him looked at him with indignation and anger. "And what did you get from me?" Issei asked with a smile. "He likes black coffee, reading the newspaper in the morning, rainy days, katsudon, junk food and healthy food, along with various soft drinks, teas and some liquids. He likes to stab the hearts of his enemies, decapitate them and break their skulls or some other bone. He hates dirt, chaos, and he likes to be in control of situations, apart from being quite orderly, sometimes a perfectionist." He likes thighs, butts and breasts, blonde girls, purple-haired, black-haired, variants of blue, also other hair colors that I don't know yet, strong, adorable, pretty, some calm or relaxed, independent, although he would be more with a girl who wins his affection and is not a bitch, added to the fact that he likes to hug his pillow while he sleeps. Also. Baru said, proud of himself, only receiving silence from Issei. Medusa spat out her tea and then started laughing, while Gabriel blushed and stroked his hair while he slapped his chest. Outside the building. Baru screamed as he was thrown out of a window. Back inside. Automatically all the shadow soldiers in the place put away some notebooks and pencils and then returned to their work just at the moment that Issei turned around while growling annoyed and floating his eyebrows. Medusa had already calmed down by then. Gabriel was still in his place blushing while he continued eating his breakfast embarrassed. Ignore that, okay? Issei asked neutrally, returning to his place but slightly away from the two women in front of him. Hi. Said Gabriel embarrassed. Okay master. Said Medusa with a smile. Issei just sighed at the reactions of both. Whatever, I have to go. Issei said, turning around. That reminds me, my brother called me earlier, he said we would have a meeting on a certain mountain, Gabriel said, somewhat thoughtfully. Shit. Issei cursed in his mind and then sighed. I'm Skip. Why am I here? Issei wondered. He was in a snowy area, while he was enveloped in darkness that turned into a battle suit. By the way, good job to the magicians on the necklace I'm wearing now, I like the touch that people who see me don't recognize me as Issei Hyoudou. Issei said with a smile, seeing in his shadow several blue or purple eyes that were celebrating. My lord, are you sure about this? Igris asked seriously when he appeared on the black-haired man's shoulder. What's wrong Igris? Normally you wouldn't be hesitating. Issei asked seriously without seeing the shadow. I feel like someone innocent is going to get hurt, Igris said seriously. I doubt that should matter to us. Issei said normally, before starting to walk. It was a quiet walk, it took a while. It took a while for him to get bored and summon Tank, the bear, jumping on him and giving the order to advance at high speed, destroying everything that crossed his path. Now with greater speed, it didn't take long for him to reach the place where the voice in his head had drawn him. He found the faction's facilities, which annoyed him. Arise. Issei said from his shadow an explosion was seen, and from there, his shadow soldiers emerged, with Igris on his right and Baru on his left. Several wyverns shot into the sky, along with small dragons, led by Kaisel. Pack stood behind Issei along with Tusk, the bear being surrounded by magical beasts and other lesser bears. While the former orc leader was surrounded by his former orc guard, while a row was placed on his sides being of lesser magicians or sorcerers and warlocks. But that did not take away the fact that even so, in Issei's shadow, there were still some chivalrous, magicians, sorcerers and warlocks, beasts, insects, among other types of shadows. Let the bombardment begin. Issei said before starting to walk. Iron stood in front of him with his shield. From the sky, the wyvern spun in the air and then dropped down, going on a suicidal attack against the facility, crashing into it and causing large explosions, then regenerating and starting to attack the survivors. The dragons were the same case, but instead of going into a dive, they turned into a ball and then wrapped themselves in their respective elements: fire, earth, wind, smell, air, water, lightning. Then they went against the facility, causing even more chaos and destruction. The ground troops charged against the angels, fallen angels, Asgardians, Yaques and devils, who were on the ground, and went to attack hand to hand. The deaths were not long in coming, and with it, more soldiers to the army of shadows. Issei remained at the front killing every being that crossed his path. Perhaps he had soldiers who would follow his orders no matter what, but even so, he would not allow them to do all his work for him. After all, what kind of leader would he be if he left everything to his children? An explosion erupted from the facility. Dragons began to emerge, slaughtering those in sight, while other explosions now erupted from the ceiling. Wyverns with shutters in their mouths, which they ate or tore apart between their teeth, then entered the facility to hunt again. Issei smiled. Iron shouted as he released a red aura, drawing everyone's attention and causing the enemies around him to turn their attention to him. Hank destroyed those who approached Iron, along with Iron himself, who with his axe, destroyed everyone who crossed his path, opening the way for him, along with Igris and Baru to his king, who walked behind them, causing the shadows of the murder to emerge. Shadow archers loaded their arrows and fired them overloaded with mana. These were stopped by some magical shields of the soldiers of the installation, but another row of archers fired. Once the shields fell before the first impact of arrows, now they are passing by impacting against their enemies. Another explosion, corpses were thrown into the air. The shadow soldiers reached the walls of the facility and destroyed them with ease, being led by Igris, who with his lightning sword, vaporized several supernatural beings. It's time to end this. Issei said, arriving at the middle area of the facility, which was a large courtyard. Instantly, all of his shadows dissipated, returning to their mist forms and returning with his lore, enveloping him and giving him his mana, when Issei created a sword of darkness and raised it above his head. A dark glow was seen, and with it, a dark pulse was fired, eradicating everything around it, filling it with darkness, and killing every living being that remained, which were directly transformed into shadows of Issei's army. The dark pulse surrounded the entire facility, then stopped at the edges and contracted, instantly shrinking and absorbing everything that was within the limited area, bringing everything to the shadow of the black-haired man, who sighed tiredly. "Shit, I won't be able to use my powers at 100% for a few moments, even you guys won't be able to materialize," Issei said, seeing his shadow, after leaving the entire area of the facilities, in a smooth area, where the waves fell slowly. The shadow's eyes reflected little stars at the display of power of their lord, who turned and began to walk towards a source of power that he managed to feel. The road led to a curve that he saw in the distance. He used his superhuman speed to get there. Once there, he saw the count, darkness and shadows came out, the dark matter moved through clays, trying to catch whatever it was, so it could take it to the darkness and swallow it deep inside. Issei knelt down and extended his hand. The darkness moved to catch the black-haired man's hand, enveloping it and squeezing it tightly, almost breaking his hand, but touching it, the instant they felt who it was, they stopped at the last moment, caressing Issei before leaving him, but not before pulling him a little, to give him the initiative to enter the cave. Once that happened, Issei got up and began to walk inside the cave, looking for whatever it was that brought him to the place. And only darkness was found. Darkness was the only thing that greeted him, but still, he knew where to go, why and where he was going. His shadow soldiers moved, showing smiles in their eyes, as they too were embraced by the darkness, now moving through it to be at their lord's side. "My lord, this feeling," Baru said confused. "It's beautiful." Igris and Issei said at the same time, the black-haired man with a smile, while the knight with a smile on his eyes. "Beautiful?" Baru asked confused. It was the first time he felt this feeling, and he was not yet familiar with emotions and feelings, not in their entirety. "It's like Valhalla," Iron said, being supported by the other Nordic shadows. "I don't have the slightest idea of your beliefs, but I'm sure you were a thing of Valhalla. It doesn't compare to the shadow of our lord," Baru said determinedly and without hesitation. Issei laughed and just shook his head at the interaction of his shadows, then began to walk, going deeper into the darkness. "So this is what I'm looking for," Issei said, seeing a purple gem, rubbing in the air and having a small brown rope around it. "This is why I've been having headaches," Issei said as he began to walk to the gem. He felt a warmth like no other, something calling him and insisting that he take it. He also felt the excitement of its shadows, so not wanting his time to be wasted, he brought his hand to the gem, taking it between his fingers. "Time skip. This is strange," Michael said, landing in front of the cave entrance, noticing the lack of darkness. "There is nothing within 20 kilometers around, it's as if the earth had treated them all," Azazel said, landing next to the angel, who sighed. "Even the earth would have left some stone," Surzic said, annoyed, arriving where they were. "Perhaps a teleportation spell," Auden suggested, arriving with them. "That would have left magical traces. Here there is only the aura of death," Anubis said seriously, looking around. "The darkness of the cave disappeared completely," Gabriel said, looking at the entrance calmly. "We should," Zu said, but at that moment, a peak of power began to be felt inside the cave. This was strange for him. He could feel his heart beating again. The instant he took the crystal, it entered his body through his hand, moving up to his heart, and then disappeared as if it had never disappeared. And with all this, only one thing could come. Disappointment. Disappointment after imagining something of greater power or importance. He never expected only this, a gem with the presence of death that disappeared in his heart, as if it had never existed. He sighed heavily. So much headache, mana drain and time wasted just for this. At least now he had new shadow soldiers. That was something. So resigned, he turned around and began to walk, disappointed by all this, along with his shadows, who expected an increase in power for their king. As he went further, he could sense signatures of power outside the cave entrance. It seemed that the meeting Gabriel had mentioned had already begun. He just walked calmly, materializing a scythe of darkness, while Igris, Baru and Iron solidified at his sides, ready to fight alongside their lord. "Well, I didn't expect this," Issei said, looking at everyone outside. He was instantly targeted with several spells and weapons, which threatened his life. He just sighed, but he glanced at Gabriel, who was nervous and blushing. It seems that she still hasn't gotten over what Baru said. It didn't really matter. Issei was more focused on the gods in front of him. He was powerful, but not enough to fight against greater divinities. "Identify yourself," Zu said seriously, pointing at the black-haired man with his lightning bolts, marvels. "Shadow to you, I'm the one who caused you some trouble," Issei said calmly, Igris standing next to him, causing the people to be surprised to recognize the knight. So it's you? Said Auden seriously and coldly. Who are you exactly? Azazel asked seriously. That him. Said Issei with a mocking smile, causing everyone to be confused. Huh? Said Surzich pointing a magic circle at the black-haired man. The one who? You know, I better not finish it, I don't want to die. Issei said thinking about what he was going to say. He's joking, let's just get this over with. Anubis said as he began to walk towards Issei. But if he is the god of life that they consider to be the god of death, even his father and brothers believe that. Issei mocked amused, watching as Anubis stood still in his place. You? Filthy mortal, what did you say? Anubis asked angrily. Issei just smiled. That one day I will have you kneeling before me kissing my feet. Issei said calmly, before Beru went against the funeral god, who received the ant to block it with his scythe. What are you? Anubis exclaimed to better analyze Beru. I am Beru. The king ant replied, before attempting to decapitate the god. At that moment a battle began, advantages for Issei. Speed and greater numbers, which were already being used. Disadvantages for Issei. He had numbers, but not all of them could be of great quality, unlike his enemies who were already ready tomorrow when all that began. Boom. Explosions were not long in coming, the shadow soldiers were torn apart and then returned to their solid form to continue fighting. Issei went against a weak and easy one, against whom he had a guaranteed victory. Azazel lost his left arm, then his right arm and was about to be decapitated before a divine light hit Issei, causing him to move away from the crow. Michael fired light bullets or spears of light. With Issei having to dodge, he tried to use his scythe to get rid of the light attacks, but his darkness weapon was instantly destroyed. Unfortunately for him, he was beginning to be surrounded by several people. Iron, noticing this, stood between his leader and his enemies, blocking Michael's tanks with his shield. Surprisingly, the Shadow Warrior's shield withstood the light attacks, which Issei took advantage of by granting 2 long daggers of darkness, these being of higher quality and more mana concentrated in it, to then go to one side against Michael, who anticipated him and blocked the black-haired man's attacks with his own daggers of light. Both looked at each other in the eyes, light and darkness collided and then retreated and collided again at high speed. To Issei's surprise, a cut was sent to his eye, causing him to step back as blood flew out of his left eye. Boom. An explosion arose behind him. Iron tried to defend Issei from an attack from behind by Surzich, but the power of destruction overwhelmed the warrior who lost his physical form. Igris moved as quickly as possible to stop the red-haired man's attack, cutting off his left arm and then stabbing him in the chest. But by that time the attack had already been fired. Issei, without noticing, felt Beru stand behind him, screaming in pain. Turning around, he would see how the attack came towards him. With no other option, he released darkness and shadows, creating a shield of darkness with which he protected himself. Boom. The dome-shaped shield was destroyed, and the black-haired man was sent flying by the shock wave, rolling on the ground, bleeding, since even so, part of the power of the destruction managed to reach him. He saw a light approaching him at high speed. He tried to get up, leaning on one of his knees while creating 2 more daggers of darkness. But it was too late, Michael's light was about to pierce him in the form of a spear of light. Blood flew through the air, the look of horror on everyone's faces was palpable. Issei watched this in disbelief at what had happened. Blood fell on his face and all over his clothes, into the snow and onto Michael. Gabriel was being pierced by Michael's spear, while protecting Issei. Hahaha, you really are a fool. Ice kun, said Gabriel looking over his shoulder, while smiling at the black-haired man who went from shock to concern. She felt light in his arms, she knew how much he thought, even if it was very offensive for a woman. Issei knew and realized that Gabriel thought less because of the total destruction of his heart. His chest is ripped open by a hole that goes through everything, destroying tissue, Karen, bones, organs and spine. Michael's look of horror was palpable all over his face. Issei laid the angel on his legs, while holding her with his arms. The shadow soldiers exploded in mana and darkness, showing that their blue color was now purple like their eyes of their master who looked in horror at the badly wounded Gabriel. Appreciate what you have, because at any moment you will lose it. That damn voice echoed again in his mind. He felt a small hand rest on his left cheek. He saw how Gabriel smiled at him with sincerity and a dazzling smile. Michael tried to do something, but was attacked by Beru who tried to kill him. But Anubis moved quickly and managed to protect the angel. Michael, do something and don't stand there with a stupid guy. Anubis seriously and angrily. But unfortunately Igris moved towards them, almost managing to kill Michael who was saved by Surzich. Big Igris, Surzich exclaimed as he entered, blocking the death soldier's sword with his power of destruction. Igris just closed his eyes recognizing the deed, but it didn't matter what he was, he already had a king, and that was the only important thing now, his king was in trouble, and he had to protect him like his sword. Cough cough, I never thought this would happen. Gabriel said with a smile, caressing Issei's cheek. Keep quiet, or you will die. Said Issei. Tusk manifested in the man of him and chibi form, analyzing the angel. I'm sorry, my lord, but I can't do anything, the light forbids me, Tusk said in frustration at not achieving anything to help his king. Yes. I knew this would happen at any moment. Said Gabriel watching how particles of light came out of his chest. Don't talk. I just need Beru to come and heal you. Issei said, about to shout the shadow's name, but Tusk interrupted him. My king, there is nothing that can be done, Beru will receive critical damage the moment he approaches her, he does not feel it due to the fact that the necklace he has prevents critical damage from weapons or light attacks. Said Tusk with sadness and looking at the ground, seeing Gabriel's wound out of the corner of his eye. The black-haired boy just looked annoyed, but a small, weak laugh caught his attention. Looking down, he saw Gabriel still smiling at him. Why are you smiling? You're dying. Issei asked incredulously and annoyed with the girl. You're here, that's enough for me, and I kept my promise, I protected you like the guardian angel that I am. Gabriel said with amusement. Issei laughed bitterly at that fact. You're stupid, Issei said, tears starting to fall down his cheeks, which were dried by Gabriel who smiled at him fondly. Don't cry, it makes you less attractive, the angel weakly mocked with a smile. It's something that can't be helped. Issei said bitterly, still crying. Then I'll have to do something to prevent that. Gabriel said before approaching Issei, who became confused. Hiss. Gently, lovingly and affectionately, the angel placed her lips over the black-haired boy's, who opened his eyes wide. Gabriel closed his eyes calmly, while the kiss continued on its way. Tusk opened his mouth, which seemed like it was going to fall or hit the ground. All in his surprise and at what he saw, a feeling of respect grew in him at the bravery of the girl. Not even the female shadows would dare to do that to his lord. Unfortunately for both darkness and light, the kiss came to an end when they both separated, Issei because of the lack of air and Gabriel because he lost his strength. Now that he thought about it, how did he move his arms with his spine shattered? That didn't matter now. More so when Gabriel's body lay unresponsive in his arms. Issei just looked down, his hair covering his eyes. Tusk. Am I immune to light? Issei asked without any emotion. Only to the critical damage, my lord. The orc responded quickly. That's enough, Issei said before placing his hand on the girl's chest, right in the hole where the light particles were still coming out. Smoke soon began to form and was coming out of his hand, burning his palm and fingers. My lord, what are you doing? Tusk asked in disbelief and surprised. I will try to regenerate your lost parts with vital energy and darkness. Issei answered coldly and seriously. That won't be possible, the light will eliminate the darkness, Tusk responded, worried about the black-haired man's well-being. Then I will have to force my darkness to be so dark to match or consume the light. Issei said, flashes of purple light were seen in his eyes for a few moments. An explosion of darkness erupted from his hand, embracing several meters around him. At the same time, darkness and shadow swirled from the black-haired man's body and concentrated in his hand, then entered the woman's body. With them, purple neon lines and a purple aura shaped like translucent fire, spun with the darkness and entered the woman's chest, spinning like a whirlpool. The darkness that spread around them began to spin around the two of them, then transformed into thread-like strands and entered the girl's chest. Finally a purple light was seen and everything stopped. The sound of weapons clashing echoed in the distance, but that didn't matter now. She laid Gabriel on her lap, her clothes torn across her chest, but showing nothing revealing or compromising, only her cleavage where a purple glow could be seen crossing her flesh and skin, then disappearing. Issei sighed heavily and held his chest on the left side, annoyed group, feeling the darkness spinning around his heart. My lord. I called Tusk in shock. That's right, Tusk, I gave her my heart so she could live, although I can still feel that gem where my heart should be, but if it doesn't matter now, she's safe. Issei said and then touched Gabriel's abdomen and enveloped the woman in a dome of darkness. Two lightsabers went to cut his neck. The black-haired man released a wave of dark power that threw Michael several meters back. Strands of darkness were shot in all directions, moving randomly, forming an aura of darkness around Issei that scared everyone present, except the shadow soldiers who smiled internally with malice at the reactions of their enemies. Issei's eyes glowed neon, a trail formed from his right eye and flew finely through the air, swirling at the release of the black-haired man's power. Anubis, Zeus and Surzich saw this and were about to go against him, but a sword stood in their way. I cannot allow them to interfere with the punishment of the rotten light, said Igris seriously, resting his sword on the ground in front of the three leaders. But if you look closely, power was overflowing from the openings in his armor and through his sword that shines in neon purple. The knight felt a strange increase in his own power thanks to his king's reaction, something he liked, but at the same time he disliked the reason. That this woman had to suffer and almost die, along with his king's low appreciation for her. It was something he didn't like, but it was good that his king had just reconsidered that, or that was his thinking, who knows. Igris, step aside, Surzich ordered seriously. I no longer follow your orders, at this moment, I have a king to protect and follow. Igris responded coldly, his sword releasing annihilating purple electrical rays. So be it, die together with your king, damn traitor. Surzich said with hatred before going against the Dark Knight. Light and darkness collided with each other, equal. Michael watched in amazement, while Issei just watched without any emotion. You may be his brother, but I won't let you leave here without any broken bones. Issei said angrily, clashing his darkness damage with Michael's sword. Wisps of darkness and light flew around the two as they sped across the battlefield, attempting to strike their opponent. Faced with this mixed result, Issei released his energy, causing an increase in speed, thus managing to surpass Michel and cut off his left arm, which flew through the air. The angel screamed in pain, but all the air and oxygen in his lungs was suddenly expelled by a punch to the stomach, followed by a knee to the abdomen. Crack. The horrible sound of his ribs breaking horrified him, and then he received a punch to the face that sent him backwards. Issei moved behind him, and in a second, he connected multiple cuts on the angel's back, causing bloody la primas, blood, flesh and bone to fly through the air, being shot in all directions. Darkness whirled around his left hand and struck the angel in the back, sending him several meters forward. His only arm was grabbed by what looked like a whip of darkness with a purple glow, and then he was pulled towards him with force. Receiving a kick, another blow to the abdomen ending up breaking his ribs and causing them to stick in important parts. Issei did not stop and released more power, which seriously hurt Michael. The black-haired man grabbed the angel's face and then began to hit him multiple times, blood flying through the air, while Issei watched emotionlessly as the blonde screamed in pain. You guys always come when you're not needed, always butting in where it doesn't concern you, trying to control everything you see and don't know, but I'm fed up. If you want to screw me over so much and not allow me to have a quiet life, then I'll make your fucking lives a misery. Issei said with hatred and anger, finishing hitting Michael, and then getting up. Who are you? Michel asked with difficulty, seeing with his right eye half closed, his left eye having long since stopped showing anything. Issei roughly and firmly grabs the collar around his neck and yanks it off, then takes off his hood, horrifying and surprising Michael. I am Issei Kajanu, the Monarch of Shadows and King of Death. Issei said coldly and emotionlessly, then stomped hard on the blonde's abdomen, causing another crunch and causing him to vomit blood. Time skip. He let out a sigh as the blonde-haired girl began to wake up. His gem-like orb brothers greeted him. What worried him was the fact that the left eye, formerly sapphire, was now amethyst, with a black void around it. She felt a hand hold hers, looking better. She noticed Issei holding her hand and caressing it with his thumb. They both looked directly into each other's eyes, with Issei also having those amethyst void eyes. You look tired, the blonde mocked lightly in a calm manner. Why don't you hate me? He didn't care what Gabriel said, going straight to the point. Why hate the one I have to take care of? Gabriel asked with a smile. Issei let out a small laugh and looked at the ground bitterly. The kiss says something else. Gabriel, I killed the Nordic dwarves, I mutilated every squad they sent to capture me, and I eradicated every living being that stood in my way. I don't deserve what you offer me, even that wasn't enough for me, I took away half of your light. Said Issei sipping bitterly. Gabriel sighed lightly to sit on the edge of the bed and hold Issei by the cheek, again by the left cheek. I know what you did, I saw it in your soul and heart, but still, you didn't do it with bad intentions other than greed for power, Gabriel began saying calmly. So you justify my genocides? Issei asked incredulously. The truth is no, what you did is unforgivable. Continuing speaking causing a sigh from Issei. But still, what's done is done, there's no way to change things and more at this point in the game, apart from that my brothers did worse things. Letting out a sigh. Even if that's how things are, I can't hate you or feel anything negative against you at this moment. Said Gabriel looking down, but keeping a constant smile. Please don't finish the sentence. Issei said sighing. Issei, I love you. I didn't fall in love with the Monarch of the Shadows, I fell in love with a man who prepares my food, who flattered me in the past and didn't see me for my body, but for who I was. I fell in love with a man who cares about me, and who pretends not to be worried about me when that's a lie. You really are quite that tsundere. Gabriel said, laughing a little at the end, covering his mouth elegantly. Issei sighed and looked up. Gabriel noticed this and did so too. They both looked into each other's eyes again. Issei brought his right hand to the blonde's face, caressing her cheek and running his thumb near her purple eyes, causing Gabriel to close them for a few moments. What am I going to do with you? Issei asked, irritated and sighing, closing his eyes for a few moments. Feed me, take care of me, pamper me and love me. Gabriel said with a smile, placing a hand on the hand Issei had on his cheek. You're asking too much, Issei said, snorting with a slight smile. Issei, I'm hungry. Gabriel said suddenly and letting himself fall into Issei's hand, who had blank or rather black eyes. First we have to do some tests on how your body is, then you will eat. Issei said sternly. But I'm hungry, Gabriel reproached, puffing out his cheeks in a pout, causing Issei to sigh. Okay, well I'll bring you food now. Issei said in defeat, not wanting to deal with the angel's cravings. Okay, I'll help you, Gabriel said with a smile, but chains of darkness came out from under the bed and held her there. You better stay, I'll be right back with your breakfast. Issei said as he left the room, listening to the complaints of the blonde who called him at the top of her lungs. Issei rested his left cheek on his hand, his elbow resting on his knee. All while watching Gabriel sleep passively in his bed. I sigh quietly as I close my eyes. I open them again, seeing how their shadows emerge from between the seraph's body. These same ones wrapped around Issei's outstretched right arm, moving up it before settling on his shoulders. We've analyzed it completely, Tusk said seriously. As much as her light origin and the artificial origin of darkness that was implanted in her are constantly clashing, trying to take control of the other. Light Shadow continued speaking with concern. It is a constant struggle, this can lead to her imminent death. Tusk clarified, looking at Gabriel. Is there anything that can be done? Issei asked seriously. We don't have many options, we'll just have to have enough hope that both halves can balance themselves. Her dark side can't be removed anymore, it's part of her now. We could help her with some objects or magic, we can't remove the origin of darkness either, it's part of her and doing that will only cause her death. Tusk responded seriously. Issei just sighed and took out a diary from his trench coat. This is the diary of the biblical god, I stole it from the angels in the past, use it, look for any way to avoid his death. Issei said without emotion in his gaze, his eyes shining purple. I hand the journal to the orc, who smiled and ignored the incredulous look from the healing angel's shadow. Stay, I swear to her to make sure nothing bad happens to her, call if something happens or they find a way to cure her. Issei said, he got up from his seat and began to walk towards the door of the room. Tusk and Light got off of him and stood on the edges of Gabriel's bed, watching their master leave the room. This is serious, it really is. The first to speak was Tusk, seeing the diary in his hands. Because of its chibi shape, the diary was almost the same size as him. I never thought our lord had my father's diary, is it at least? I've never seen it and I've never heard of him having one. Light said doubtfully, looking at the diary the orc held in his hands. I really don't know, we'll have to see it to confirm that. Said the orc and then opened the diary and placed it on the bed. At that action, Light placed himself next to him to be able to read with his dark companion. It was weird, or rather, completely strange for her. She still remembered when he healed her, when he saved her from the clutches of death. She remembered how her light began to fade in an immense darkness that devoured her little by little. But from within the darkness, a purple light emerged, and from it a different kind of darkness, perhaps a control over the darkness. That doesn't matter, in the end, the purple light saved her and gave her gold more spark to shine, apart from enveloping her and protecting her from the void itself that was the darkness that tried to devour her. After all that, she became conscious again and had him by her side. But with a big change. That lost soul that she swore to protect and guide back to the path of light was caring, that coldness was no longer there, instead there was concern, although the seriousness was still there. Now he cares about her, which made her happy. But now, he didn't know how to feel. Once he fell asleep and entered the world of dreams, he never expected to end up where he ended up now. He knew what place it was his own garden in the sky. A beautiful heavenly landscape of a meadow with multicolored flowers, some forests and mountains, with a beautiful golden sun in the sky. That is the image she has, but the one in front of her, although the same, was still completely different. The sun was gone, the sky was gray, with a white light coming through the clouds. The flowers, which used to be different, beautiful and happy colors, were now black or dark shades of gray, with a few white and some purple. The life of the forest was gone, or not at first sight, with trees with black leaves and gray trunks. Gabriel looked around her in confusion, not understanding where she was now. She was supposed to go to sleep, wherever and whenever, her mind would return to her garden and not to this spooky yet elegant copy of it. She laughed in amusement, without a doubt, Issei would fall in love with this place the moment he saw it. And at that thought, like a shot, a serious irritation arose from her. She blinked in confusion, it was the first time she had felt something like this and experienced it. What is this feeling? Gabriel asked confused, bringing her hand to her chest, above her heart, and under the beautiful white dress she wore, almost like a bride's. Apart from that, her left eye had returned to normal. That's what you feel called jealousy. A voice reached her ears, she blinked in confusion before turning around. It was at that moment that Sapphire and Amethyst met. It was her, but a dark version. Her golden blonde hair, now pale blonde like silver, her soft skin, now a sickly white but fine as porcelain, purple eyes. Wearing a black dress with a purple interior, although unlike her, the one of her other self, is much more revealing. Another thing I noticed were the black wings that rose above her shoulders, 3 pairs of them, black as coal. Compared to hers, white as the soul of a newborn, her counterparts looked elegant and serious, with serious and dominant tones. Without the majesty, delicacy, beauty and peace that she had. Light and darkness met once again, now looking into each other's eyes. With the same feelings on both sides. Absolute rivalry. Excuse me, but could you tell me who you are? Gabriel asked with a kind smile to his other self. Officer, I don't have a name, but this could be either Dark Gabriel or the one I like the most, Darkness. The darkened Gabriel reported with a soft smile, while drinking tea in her seat. This was something Gabriel had just realized. His counterpart was sitting in front of a round table, with an umbrella on top, while Darkness drank tea. What is all this? Gabriel asked with palpable doubt in his voice. His alternate version chuckled, a youthful and innocent smile, which was covered by the fingers of his hand. Oh. Dear, don't you know how to differentiate your own garden? Although of course, this is not the one in heaven. But one that my love gave me. Said Darkness with a kind and calm smile, closing her eyes at the same time. Gabriel frowned in annoyance at a sensation that had struck his chest. He didn't know what it really was, though. Haha, what's with that face? Oh, right, you've never experienced a feeling of love, haven't you, little daughter of Daddy God? Darkness asked with a mischievous and evil smile. He had to turn his head aside, letting a dagger of light almost graze his face. Shut up. Gabriel said angrily, but quickly covered his mouth in shock. I was shocked. She would never say that or do something like what she did without any logical reason, would she? Haha, relax, it's just my influence on you, let's say you're becoming more explosive. Darkness informed with a smile, knowing the thoughts of her light self. Explosive? What do you mean? Gabriel asked seriously. I'm not going to tell you, Darkness said, looking away to the side, looking amused, which bothered the golden-haired girl. But she just ended up sighing, knowing that anger was only the beginning of someone's destruction. Besides, she is not like that, she is not a being of senseless anger. So she looked back at her darkened self and sighed again, knowing that this will take a long time. It was at that very moment that she thought that. Darkness looked at her with daggers for eyes, when the golden-haired girl laughed amusedly, remembering how Issei usually sighs tiredly for almost everything around him. This only made the silver-haired girl look at her with absolute hatred. But Issei. My lord, you should calm down, desperation is not the solution, it will only be your downfall if you continue in that state. Igris warned the black-haired man who sighed, being in the kitchen, while drinking a glass of water. I know, but I can't help it. Issei said, holding his hair in frustration. Changing the subject, my lord, shouldn't I be making sure that Gorgon-san is doing his job? Igris noticed the state of his king, so he decided to quickly change the subject. To at least distract him long enough, he asked about Medusa, which he hasn't seen for a while. She has my shadows on her, and they had me doing what she does, besides Baru and Iron are with her. He lets out a sigh. I should stop doing it, I'm looking like a total stalker. Issei said, looking down and resting his head on his hand, while playing with the other with the edge of the glass on the table. I understand. Igril nodded at what the black-haired man said. A silence came after that exchange of words. The Dark Knight sweated to continue looking at Issei, noticing that his mood did not change. He was actually reproaching himself internally for not being a big talker. If only Akita were on our side, she would be able to at least distract my lord and raise his spirits. Igris thought, letting out a silent sigh, which was not noticed by Issei. But as if they heard his words, a shadow arrived that caught the attention of the two. My Basilius, I have something for you. Called the shadow of Hephaestus, appearing in the place, calling the attention of the two who turned to see him. His appearance as Issei's shadow was that of a man of purple energy, with screams running through his entire body, red ones glowing crimson, a pure metal collar around his neck and on his wrists, where he had chains wrapping around his forearms. His clothes consisted of a black breastplate with lines of purple light and black pants with black straps, above all that, a black cape with a spectral purple interior. From his completely wide eyes, a trail of whitish fire with a purple center came out. Igris nodded at the arrival of the resurrected god of iron and fire, pleased with the potential distraction he would provide for his king. Yes, what can I help you with, Hephaestus? Issei asked curiously. My Basilius, I've been noticing your situation, so I decided to give you a gift to distract you from them. Hephaestus's response was simple and direct, sounding calm and reasoned. Issei just snorted and smiled at what his shadow did. Who would say that the dead would be the ones who would appreciate it the most? Unbeknownst to him, it caused several people to sneeze and get angry, offended, feeling the need to hit the black-haired man. Well, let's see what it is, and you're right, I should relax a little. Tusk and Light are already taking care of her. Issei said, smiling slightly, a smile that his two present shadows shared. I'm glad to hear that from you, Basilius. Here I have your gift. Hephaestus said animatedly. A large amount of black fire and power of death were channeled into his hands, along with the element of shadow and darkness. These took form and dissipated, revealing two twin swords that caught the attention of Issei and Igris. It was evident that they had their covers on, which had 4 lights on the sides, 2 on each side. They are for you, my Basilius, said Hephaestus, extending both weapons to Issei, who took them with curiosity. Normally I'm more of a dagger or scythe person, but I'm not complaining, swords have their thing too, Issei said calmly, looking at both swords. If you wish, I could forge scythes and daggers for you, Hephaestus said, pleased at his king's acceptance of his weapons, who smiled at what the blacksmith said. I would like to, but that for another time. I can see that these swords are just pure metal. How would their magic be activated? Issei asked curiously while spinning the swords in his hands. They are weapons that I also created from what I saw in your fight with the angel that injured Miss Gabriel, the light winning over the darkness, and then the darkness winning over the light. It was at that moment that a memory and an idea came to me to forge these weapons. They work and respond based on their own power, functioning as a conductor and receiver for your magic, mana, power and strength. They will activate once you infuse them with your power. I had already done this with the weapons of the Trinity, but now I do it for you and therefore, of a superior quality. Hephaestus explained, crossing his arms and speaking with pride, at the same time encouraged by what he did and what his lord achieved. Well, let's see how it goes, said Issei, looking at the swords in his hands. Shadow and darkness magic, a dark and shadowy matter, with purple energy, flowed through the black-haired man's body, before heading towards the swords and enveloping them completely. These same swords absorbed the power that he was giving them. With that, a purple light passed through the controller, along with the guard and the part exposed by the sheath. It shone brightly and demonstrated great magical power. I like this, Issei said, spinning his swords, which left a purple trail in their wake. I'm glad you like my Basilius. Now, as you will notice, the weapons not only have your power, but are also linked to you. Therefore, you can also materialize and dematerialize them whenever you want, apart from the fact that they are completely part of your body, like your weapon. I achieved this thanks to the information in the diary of the biblical god that you got from the library of heaven. Hephaestus explained again with a smile. Let's see the mood of his lord. Yes. I noticed at the moment I gave them my power, I would like to try them a little, Issei said with a light smile and his eyes closed, carrying his 2 swords on his back, where he left them in the shape of an X. These same ones adhered instantly. We could go hunting tonight. According to what some trackers said, there have been several stray appearances in Hyoudou, Igris said, drawing the attention of the black-haired man, who smiled maliciously. It wouldn't be bad, it will help me distract myself, Issei said while his eyes glow purple and his sclera turned black. A purple portal opened in the middle of an alley, from where Issei would emerge. Now with a new outfit. The dark grayish trench coat with fur on the arms and around the head he has, along with a loose short-sleeved shirt, black pants with a belt and boots with metal plates. He has black gloves with fingers and a hole in the palm of his torso in the shape of a rectangle. The 2 swords are on the black-haired man's back, with only the lights of the sheath shining, while around his neck, he has a dark purple scarf. Once there, he sighed lightly and stretched his body a little. He really needed this, He wished good luck to whoever dares to bother him. Cut the wind. The sound of wind being cut rang in his ears. He quickly ducked, perfectly avoiding the attack that was going for his neck. Wow, it seems that he does have reflexes, said a stray yokai, a Kamitachi, along with several others. Issei raised an eyebrow at the weasels with scythe-like blades for legs. It was strange, they were usually found more on the outskirts of the city, not inside, being constantly defended by the guards of the yokai factions. I'm missing something, right? Issei asked, raising an eyebrow at the yokai, who frowned angrily. Another one attacked, charging at the black-haired man, who put his concern aside and smiled maliciously. He brought his hand to the handle of his left sword, taking it and causing it to ignite. The trail of purple light was seen, mowing down the yokai for brief moments, before seeing his companion being cut in half by a sword that possessed parts of energy and purple neon effects. They watched as he spun the sword in his hand like a dagger, while unsheathing the other. The last thing they knew was that they were blinded by a neon purple light. It looks like a rebellion, Issei said while standing on top of a building, watching what was happening in Hyoudou. It was total chaos. Several stray yakes attacked the yakes under the leadership of Yasaka. Something else that I noticed were the soldiers of Klupeth, this because of the symbols that the equipment, clothes or armor that the attackers had. Now that he thought about it, Issei hadn't heard anything about Rizavum's faction after the war against the Trahixa. He didn't really care though. Arise. Issei ordered. Instantly, shadows began to appear in the city, where the corpses of the fallen are. Instantly the shadows of the dead rose again, they looked around, some tried to go against those who killed them, others were confused. Until a voice sounded in his head. Welcome. In the form of a whisper that voice spoke to him, when he tried, all the shadows turned to see where the whisper came from. They met Issei who was walking calmly towards them, they didn't know anything better to do than kneel before their new king who sighed at that gesture. The sound of air being torn apart was heard, but at the last second 2 yokai shadows blocked the attack and protected Issei who smiled at that. Okay, good job, now, you better start killing everyone here, just kill the invaders. In the meantime, I'll go check on Yusaka and Kunu, those two weren't a pain in the ass like the rest of the factions. Issei said with a calm smile, his new shadows nodded and went to start a massacre against those who killed them. It didn't take long for her to arrive at the palace where a pitched battle was taking place. Issei just watched her calmly before snapping his fingers, causing more of her shadows to emerge. Go on, leave the big fish to me. Issei said calmly, at the same time a Kyuubi emerged from the palace, destroying everything in its past and killing hundreds of soldiers. Yusaka, in her Kyuubi form also emerged from the rubble of her now destroyed palace, the enemy Kyuubi faced her, and both prepared to fight. Issei only snorted amused at how ironic the situation in front of him was, because of the fur of both it was like seeing yin and yang fight each other, Yusaka with a pale blonde, while the enemy Kyuubi with black fur and red locks. Denpachi. Damn traitor, I'll kill you. Yusaka exclaimed with great hatred, preparing her chakra to launch an attack. Let's see if they can defeat me, damn dishonor. Exclaimed the dark Kyuubi, in his hand, a smoke screen was generated and showed that he now had a huge sword. I swing the gun and let it rest on my shoulder, while I smile defiantly and evilly at Yusaka. This same one fired 9 flames of pure chakra and senjutsu, but with a swing of his sword, Kenpachi easily undid the attack. Yusaka growled annoyed and was about to go against the male Kyuubi, but from one moment to another, her tails were held and she was dragged back. Turning her head, she noticed the multiple chakra chains that held her through magic seals made by stray yokai. But before she could undo them, she felt a sharp pain in her chest which caused her to roar in pain. This was due to Kenpachi who took advantage of the distraction and slashed Yusaka in the chest, before enveloping his arm in red fire through senjutsu, and then hitting Yusaka in the head, which knocked her to the ground stunned. But before Kenpachi could finish her off, a Kyuubi much smaller than the two of them jumped towards him, biting his neck making him growl in annoyance. But he grabbed her with one hand and pulled her away from him, before squeezing her tightly in his grip. Instantly her bones were heard breaking before being enveloped by a crimson inferno that burned her completely. Kunu, pathetic dwarf vermin. Throws her against her mother Yusaka who was trying to get up, but because of that she was thrown back to the ground. Where is your adorable Death Reaper knight to save you? Asked Kenpachi with a malicious smile. Here I am. Issei's voice echoed throughout the place, drawing everyone's attention. When they searched for the origin of the voice, they found it on top of a building, where Issei was looking with boredom at the dark Kyuubi who smiled maliciously and arrogantly, before pointing his gun at the black-haired man. What are you doing here? Weren't the factions supposed to be looking for you? Asked a Kyuubi with sarcasm and mockery. Issei just snorted and smiled calmly. It's not my fault that they don't realize that I'm hiding right under their noses, and that I have to show myself so that they notice me. Issei answers calmly and quietly, stretching a little as he prepared to fight. It's a shame they won't find you anymore, Kenpachi said with a smile before lowering his weapon against Issei. But the only result was the building being cut in half, with Issei disappearing at the last second. Let's see, what name will I give you when you are my shadow, Fox, Black, or maybe Foxy? Issei said on the Kyuubi's left shoulder while playing with a dagger of darkness. Kenpachi tried to crush him with his right hand, but Issei disappeared again, and Kenpachi was hit in the head and knocked to the ground with one blow. Issei slowly descended to the ground thanks to wings of darkness, before landing next to Yusaka and Kunu. He just walked and touched the younger Kyuubi who began to regenerate at great speed. He lifted her in his arms, since she had returned to her human form once healed. After that Issei began to walk towards Yusaka who was trying to get up, but the chains now wrapped around her entire body. I will help you, but in exchange, you must be my ally. But we will talk about that later, now, it is better to end this. Issei said calmly and leaving Kunu on the ground. After that he turned around and faced Kenpachi who was getting up from the ground in pain. The 50-meter giant fox recomposed himself and growled annoyed at Issei with a confident smile. Insect, I'll kill you. Kenpachi shouted in anger. At that, a colossal release of power followed that destroyed buildings around it. His sword that is now wielded with both hands released a murderous storm of red lightning, accompanied by the sounds of 1,000 thunderclaps. Issei only sighed in annoyance and cracked his knuckles before making one of his Reaper swords appear. It gave him power, more than what he had given him before. His openings where the mother of his bearer passed through shone in a neon purple. Even the edge shone the same color, with power overflowing from the shape of the edge, along with a great purple glow. Boom! The impact resonated throughout the place. The impact could be heard throughout Hyoudou. But at the same time, the lightning bolts could be seen rising into the sky and disappearing from sight. As well as the infernal crimson light that emanates and covers a large area of the city. Both enemies held their swords between each other, even Issei measuring only 1.88, and compared to the current enemy who measures more than 50 meters, was able to resist him with total ease. With a movement he pushed Kenpachi's sword to the side and gently allowed it to fall to the ground. Following that came the release of Issei's own power, which at high speed was already in the air above Kenpachi's arm, whose limb began to fall in pieces cut in a sudden manner. After that, Issei spun in the air and increased the power in his Reaper sword. Now the sword glowed purple and the power overflowed even more, with now a purely black aura bordering the purple color. "Well. It was a pleasure killing you, see you in a few seconds," Issei said before swinging his sword. A slash of darkness was released against the fox, who opened his eyes in surprise and could do nothing but watch as the slash was inches away from his face. After that he saw only black. The slash of the power of death continued its path, cutting and disintegrating the ground, without causing any explosion and passing by the side of the living, as if it were conscious and elective. It only killed with its presence those who were against Yusaka. The enemies were cut down, while the allies were saved and forgiven by the edge of death. Issei just slowly and calmly descended back to the ground. Well, he put his sword away in a pocket dimension. After that he turned to see Yusaka, who was now free. Behind her, several monster shadows of Issei devouring those who tied Yusaka. "Well, it's been a while since we last saw each other, Yusaka-chan," said Issei with a smile at the Kyuubi who returned to her kitsune form. "Issei-kun. It really is you?" Yusaka asked. The beautiful woman was confused by Issei's change in appearance, who nodded. "Yeah, after all, there are few who have the power of death," Issei said with a smile. But when he least expected it, he was hugged by the blonde who was lifting her unconscious daughter with her things. Sorry for not being there when they banished you from the factions," Yusaka said, hugging the black-haired man tightly. Issei just had a blank look. He didn't really know what to do. He just came to a conclusion and raised his arms and began to hug the woman with difficulty. He admitted it, he was never a lover of hugs, but he still knew that one was necessary right now. Okay, I knew how to take care of myself. I was fine all this time," Issei said, hugging with some difficulty the woman who smiled at his answer. For a moment, he didn't know how, but now he was hugging himself with his head resting on the chest of the woman who looked at him with a tender smile. "Hahaha, this is the second time you saved me from death," Yusaka said with a sweet smile. Issei just blushed and looked away. "It's not a big deal," Issei said coldly and emotionlessly. Unfortunately, he only received a caress on his hair which embarrassed him even more. "If it is, at least for me it is," Yusaka said with a smile. Issei just sighed in surrender. "Fine, whatever you say," Issei said grumpily, hearing only Yusaka's laughter. "Somewhere else. I will kill you all in the name of the Emperor, you filthy heretics," Beru shouted with great hatred as he slaughtered several monsters from Hades, the Greek underworld. Meanwhile, Medusa just sighed in annoyance, her eyes no longer covered by her headband and petrified at the monsters approaching her. "I can't believe that man sent me to this place," Medusa said with annoyance. Bang. A loud stomp caught Medusa's attention, who turned to see Beru walking towards the guardian of the underworld. "What the hell is wrong with that crazy ant? She is completely obsessed with raising Issei's honor," said Medusa incredulously. "For Master Issei," Beru shouted euphorically before going against Cerberus. But he would be sent crashing into a rock wall. His exoskeleton was completely shattered and parts of his body were slowly disappearing. "That was pathetic," said Medusa with a poker face, not noticing that a blur passed by her at high speed. But she managed to barely dodge Cerberus when the three-headed hound tried to devour her in 3 bites. She used her mystical eyes, but the hound was not even bothered by that look, or rather, it seemed to only be bothered by feeling the tickling of the petrification that tried to form in her body, but that was cancelled due to the great demonic magic power of the hound. He charged at her again, but Medusa dodged him in an agile and elegant manner. Avoiding being touched by that beast, she could even feel its heat from meters away from it, and the mere fact that she was touched by it would be an instant game over. Bang. Bear re-entered the battle, regenerated once again. He swung his claw at one of the hound's heads, which only growled in annoyance and hit the ant with a headbutt, sending it flying away from him. The hand with which Baru hit the dog had been charred by the heat of the dog, but even so, he did not give up and regenerated again, and went against Cerberus. I can't lose, I have to fix my mistake. Baru thought with determination. Flashback. He likes black coffee, reading the newspaper in the morning, rainy days, Katsudon, junk food and healthy food, along with various soft drinks, teas and some liquids. He likes to stab the hearts of his enemies, decapitate them and break their skulls or some other bone. He hates dirt, chaos, and he likes to be in control of situations, apart from being quite orderly, sometimes a perfectionist. He likes thighs, butts and breasts, blonde girls, purple-haired, black-haired, variants of blue, also other hair colors that I don't know yet, strong, adorable, pretty, some calm or relaxed, independent, although he would be more with a girl who wins his affection and is not a bitch, added to the fact that he likes to hug his pillow while he sleeps. Also. Baru said proud of himself, only receiving silence from Issei. Medusa spat out her tea and then started laughing, while Gabriel blushed and stroked his hair, while he slapped his chest. At that moment, Baru felt a killing intent that scared him. When he turned around, he saw Issei's eyes glow crimson before grabbing the Ant King by the face and throwing him out the window. Baru screamed as he crashed through the window before falling into the void. End of flashback. I will kill you for the honor of my lord. Baru shouted with determination. The fire monster stood in his way as he fought another ant shadow. It was devoured by Baru in a second, before another Hades monster was devoured by the Ant King who devoured every enemy that crossed his path. Cerberus growled at that and went towards the ant that saw him coming towards it. His exoskeleton compressed and his size was considerably reduced. He dodged the three-headed hound with extreme ease before his exoskeleton grew larger, giving him more strength, and now having the op, Baru connected a devastating attack to the hound's left head, breaking his bone. But he was held by the middle head and the one on the right. Using force they ended up splitting him in half and causing Baru to enter his black mist state. Medusa, who was watching the battle, only cut her palm and threw the blood that came out in front of her, where a magic circle of blood was formed. She passed her fingers over her eyes and then opened them to show how they shone brightly. Let's see how well this goes for you, Medusa said calmly. Cerberus, who noticed her presence and the magic she had accumulated, went towards her in a straight line, but before arriving, Medusa's eyes released a flash of light. A moment of light caught the three-headed hound and much of the area in a straight line. When the attack ended, it was shown that everything the Ace of Light touched had been petrified. Medusa just sighed as she watched her blood that formed the magic circle fall to the ground. She saw Cerberus in front of her completely petrified, about 30 centimeters away from the head in the middle, tearing his head off. Good dog," said Medusa, petting the petrified Cerberus on the head. Crack. Shit. Cursed Medusa before backing away. At the same time Baru took a physical form, he heard the sound of rock breaking, and by the time he realized it, his head had already been debited by Cerberus. But now the Hellhound was in a bad state, absolutely all of his skin had been petrified. His power managed to protect his muscles, which destroyed his petrified skin and caused great bleeding in him. Now the beast showed its muscles, its heads with various sockets, due to the lack of its eyes that were also turned to stone. It had the lack of the jaw on its left head, which was broken by Baru and shattered by Cerberus itself in the diversion of power to destroy its stone prison. She walked towards the Gorgon as a great heat came out of her body, and she breathed heavily. Even without eyes she knew where her prey was. Medusa just turned her nails, daggers in her hands before preparing to fight the hound that walks in a terrifying and threatening way towards her. But without either of them noticing, Baru had regenerated and continued to defeat Hades's monsters, especially those related to fire. Cerberus charged at Medusa at high speed. It was evident that the hound was in a frenzy and in a berserker state that increased its strength and speed. Medusa growled, annoyed at not having the chance to dodge. Bang. Baru landed a powerful hammer blow on the hound's spine, causing Cerberus to fall to the ground and growl in pain. Now, the ant had not been burned by the contact of the infernal monster and stood triumphantly above it. Stupid dog, one of my abilities is to obtain the ability of what I eat along with its strength. I was eating those fire monsters the whole time, and not only do I now have the ability to control fire, I am now immune to your fucking heat, and I am stronger than before. Baru said triumphantly and with a superior tone. The hound just spun on the ground and crushed Baru, who dug his claws into the dog who howled in pain before throwing him against a rock wall. Baru let out a scream of struggle before charging at a disoriented Cerberus. The right head was severed, decapitated thanks to multiple cuts from the Baru's claws, before piercing the neck of the left head and pulling its throat out. The middle head tried to move, but Baru held both jaws with gentle claws. Before he could force them open, a crack resounded throughout the place and Cerberus fell dead to the ground. Baru roared towards the sky with the corpse of his enemy at his feet. Medusa just watched him as he approached her. She saw the monster that refused to die to protect what he was sent to protect. Without a doubt a sign of having the title of Guardian of the Underworld. Medusa just took out a kind of small mirror from a bag she had, and it shined for a few moments. Issei, we already got what you asked for. It cost us more than it should have, but we did it, we are waiting for you. She turns her gaze a little and sees how more Hades monsters and guards approach the place. With some small guests. Medusa finished saying before cutting the call and putting the mirror in her bag, before crouching down and taking a running stance, ready to kill the enemies that approached her. The shadow soldiers shared the same idea and prepared themselves, with Barry now moving forward and facing his future victims. For our monarch. Barry shouted euphorically. For our monarch. The other shadow soldiers shouted euphorically before they all went against the guards and monsters of Hades. Medusa just sighed in annoyance before entering into combat with her shadowy allies. That's it guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. With that, take care.